clever pun. The Conversation.
Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
Hello, and I am Courtney, who keeps refusing to legally change my last name, so I'm just Courtney right now, also known as Alter Mentality.
Oh no. Courtney.
I was going to do it, and then, I had to get my passport renewed earlier this year, and I was like, well, I just did that, I don't want to do it again, so I'm going on, a trip where I'm going to use my passport later in the year, and I think, after that, I'm finally going to legally change my last name since I got married, I think, probably.
No, that's fine, but after a certain while, you're just going to be just the mono name kind of, celebrity, like a Cher or a Madonna or a more contemporary reference than those two.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Well, I'm fine with it too, so long as you promise me we're not going to go 8 hours on this episode again.
Yeah, speaking of being married, my husband will also be relieved if you don't steal me away for 8 hours tonight. So we'll try not to.
You haven't been on the podcast since those marathon episodes on Bonanza that we did on the planet core and beyond, and then the calls about that. And those were the longest conversations on record. And I've mentioned recently how I've kind of lost my way after those episodes because those felt like the finale of the conversation. It felt like it just should have ended there, and I didn't know how to keep this thing going. So I've only recently sort of rediscovered how to do this without having that grand capper on top of everything. So what we're going to do is something far more simpler than try to summarize what a 3D Donkey Kong platformer that had been long awaited means to us. And that's by talking about another 3D Donkey Kong platformer on this episode that means a great deal to a great many people. And we have also waited a very long time for it to show up in this format. But I don't think it's going to be as time-consuming a project, because what I'm referring to, of course, is Donkey Kong 64. It finally came to Nintendo Classics for Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack members on June 3rd in the Americas, but June 4th in most of the world, as in 6/4, even though a lot of those countries would arrange the date as 4/6. It doesn't really work, but it kind of works, and I applaud them all the same for doing it. Now, given that you, Courtney, you're one of the biggest fans of Donkey Kong 64 in the greater Donkey Kong universe fan community, I knew we would need to bring you back on once they announced this to once again discuss DK64, but specifically in this context, how it plays on the Switch and or Switch 2, and I think more interestingly, how it now feels in a post-Donkey Kong Bananza world.
Yeah, I was on vacation when they announced this, so I was actually visiting my husband's side of the family, and it was the evening, and I just saw the update on my phone that they were putting this on Nintendo Switch Online, and I was like, oh, and I had called my husband over, I was like, it's finally happening, you're not gonna believe it, and he's like, what? And I'm like, I got so excited, and I was telling him DK64 is gonna be on the Switch Online, and then I wondered if you were going to reach out to me, because I know it's, the Stinky Ape summer season, there's lots going on, lots of game reveals, and, most of them hadn't happened yet, because this was, I guess, the very end of May, and I knew you'd be super busy, and we just talked in depth about DK64 just a year and a half ago, so I was like, oh, I hope he reaches out to me, but maybe he won't, I've already been on the conversation enough last year to last, a lifetime. But I'm really glad you did. It's always an honor to be here. I always love talking about DK64, so I'm so happy. Thank you for having me on again.
Of course. Every time I think we've really just mined the depths of everything there is to discuss one of these games, there's always a new angle to approach it from. And I think that's one of the gifts Bonanza has given us, not just, oh my God, it's a new Donkey Kong game. Oh my God, it's a new 3D Donkey Kong game. Oh my God, it's a Donkey Kong game that celebrates the entire history of Donkey Kong. Oh my God, they're doing what with the Kremling source? They're doing what with the Kremlings? And we can now look at a lot of these classic games from this new context. And Donkey Kong 64 is no exception, especially because in a lot of surprising ways, Bonanza did serve as sort of a direct, I'm using in scare quotes, sequel to Donkey Kong 64. And I think that was one of the more surprising takeaways from it is, oh wow, they're not actually shying away from this messy bitch of a game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting to discuss it with you. Now, as Courtney alluded to, this is a very busy time for the Kongversation. For those who have missed it, we are in the thick of double episodes a week coming out of the Stinky Ape Summer Reveal Week, the former E3, now Stinky Ape Summer for our purposes. But we did the DK Challenge First Impressions episode with Dustin. That episode is now live. It's kind of a bonus episode that's just been plonked into the schedule. And then we've got, in the following order, a discussion of Sea of Thieves Season 19 and recent Xbox woes with Jeff. That should be fun. A look at the Donkey Kong Bananza theme for the Alarmo with a person I still haven't figured out who I'm going to con to do an episode about the Alarmo with me. And
I know who should get TT. He's a clock.
So he is a clock.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, TT is not responding to my calls being entirely fictional.
Dang it.
Yeah. I think Rare is keeping TT locked in a vault somewhere deep beneath Manor Park. I can't find TT anywhere right now. We've got first impressions of the Super Pocket Rare Edition. I was going to say copy. I guess it is a copy, but my device with the cartridge has shipped, so it is on the way now. We're potentially going to do an episode on the new Star Fox. I don't want to put too much on my plate. I'm a cheery go-getter, but even I have my breaking points. And another Yuka Replayly episode with Freezer to discuss it at 60 frames per second on the Switch 2, among other episodes that we have coming down the pipeline. But as far as our 2-episode-a-week schedule going into July, that's what I have planned at the moment. So, yeah, thank you to our patrons who make this possible. As I always say, we couldn't do DK Vine without our patrons who support us financially. You know, we don't have ad revenue except on our YouTube channel, but we don't put ads on our website. I don't put ads in the podcast. Maybe that'll change one day. Probably not for the website, though. I like that clean aesthetic. I don't want to bombard our readers with nonsense. This isn't a fandom wiki. This is something pure. This is Donkey Kong journalism. So our patrons make that possible. Thank you all. We do live stream these episodes for our $5 and up patrons. I always like to say hello to everyone who's listening to these episodes live. And right now, that's Traveler of the Stars. That's TJ. That's Just Andre. That's March Rose. That's Skips. Hello, everyone. How many of those people are either frequent Kongversation callers or former Kongversation co-host?
Most of them. Yes.
Most of them.
Also, Cameron's here too. Hello.
Yeah,
Cameron
has joined us. It says, be sure to set this podcast to widescreen.
Yeah, don't forget.
This is the first Donkey Kong 64 screenshot I have used as Kongversation key art on our YouTube and SoundCloud uploads to use the widescreen mode. Never done it before. I've always used the standard version of the screen for DK64 just out of the box because I've never had a working widescreen mode for DK64. I've never had a TV to accommodate it, rather, and I've just never bothered with it. So yeah, it's a new experience for me.
Yeah, same here. We can get into that later, but I always play DK64 right here on my Jungle Green N64 on my very square CRT that is right next to me right now.
We'll talk about it a little bit, but yeah, it's kind of a trip. All these options that I kind of scoffed at or troughed at back in 1999, say like, why would I ever use that? And now it's 2026. I'm like, well, of course I would use that. Why wouldn't I use that? So, yeah, Courtney, what is going on in the world of alter mentality right now?
Oh, Hyle, I have so much. You know, it's funny. I was listening to our old DK64 episode from late 2024 earlier today to make sure I didn't repeat too many points I had said then. And, you know, at that time, you asked me the same thing, and I was like, I draw things now and then. I don't know. I don't have much going on. But now I got so much going on. You know, 2026 has been not a great year for me personally, personal life speaking, but there has been a shining light for me that keeps me going, and that is the project I have started. I talked about it when it was still in its planning stages, the last episodes we did together, and it has now come to fruition, and it is better than I could have ever possibly hoped for. That is called the Kremling Chronology. It is a mission to play every game with Kremlings in it, whether that be obviously something very important like Donkey Kong Country, Donkey Kong Land, or down to a very small cameo like the fact that Mario Party 7 has those unnamed claptraps that are clearly claptraps in it, or Mario Power Tennis or something like that. But every game, including different versions of games like the GBA remakes or Donkey Kong Country on the GBC, a lot of these remakes I've never played. Most of these games I have played before, but there's a lot of like alternate versions of them. You know, Diddy Kong Racing DS I've never played. And not only playing the games, but we are looking at comics and Nintendo Powers and basically anything that is about Kremlings that has any sort of official seal, Nintendo seal of approval on it. And I do that on my Twitch most Saturdays. I didn't do it today because I'm trying to stay in the DK64 mindset, and currently we're in the midst of talking about Donkey Kong Country 3. But I will resume it next Saturday. And yeah, so twitch.tv/altermentality if you like Donkey Kong content. It's kind of interesting because you talked about like our episodes giving you this crisis where you were like, where do I go from here? And by the way, you've been doing a great job. I know you're probably self-conscious about like living up to that, but the Kongversation and DK Vine and everything continues to be just a really good resource for all that's happening. And there's still so much Donkey Kong stuff happening all the time. So like, I think you've been doing a great job. But for me,
I know.
See, yeah, you got nothing to worry about. It also gave me it was sort of a breaking point for me, but in a positive direction, where I felt like my journey as, you know, a little bit of a fan researcher and historian in my own way was just beginning. And I really decided that I wanted to lean in hard into this special interest I've had my whole life, and that I wanted to tell the story of the Kremlings and spread it to more people. So here we are. It's been a blast. A blastomatic.
You might say, yeah. It's funny because I'm also going through the history of the series, but I'm doing a video on Bananergy and the Banandium root and the Kremling source and the Lost Worlds, plural, and all of the mythology that exists shared between Rare and Bonanza on this subject. And it's breaking my brain a little bit because every time I think I have the draft done, then I remember something else. I remember some other errant detail, and that leads me spiraling down 20 more pages that I can write. And yeah, it's amazing how deep this series and shared universe can actually get. And I mean, it's funny because you were on the episode in the Bonanza hype cycle period shortly after the Donkey Kong Bananza Direct that we just passed the 1-year anniversary of, where we discussed kind of a rebuttal of a article that was on a major video game website about Nintendo not caring about the lore of Donkey Kong, and then Bonanza just served as kind of a direct rebuttal in every way to that. But it's just, yeah, this nonsense really can just take on a life of its own in your own life, and before you know it, you have lost control of it.
Yeah, like I thought this project would maybe take me like a year, but at the rate we're going, looking at all of these players' guides and Nintendo Powers and extra stuff, it's probably going to take me at least 2 years, and that's with doing an episode almost every single week. So, you know, there's a lot out there.
You're going to jut up into new content eventually. I mean, you're going to be like, I'm winding down, and then there's going to be a new Donkey Kong game with Kremlings, or the movie, and you're just going to keep going from there. That's the curse. Yep.
That's the plan. That's the hope, you know?
When I really leaned into DK Vine full time and started figuring that out, like how I could do that, how I could transition the site from, you know, this kind of weird hobby that started when I was a teenager into a job, it was during a real low ebb for news, for all of this. And now it's just like, what did I get myself into? This is almost too much for one person to handle everything. Not that I do it by myself, but I have to manage it all myself. And it's definitely becoming one of those things where my free time has rapidly slipped away.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, speaking of things that are almost too much, Donkey Kong 64.
Yeah, DK64 definitely fits that bill. It's the original, oh my god, what did I get myself into by becoming a fan of this series? Last time we discussed Donkey Kong 64 in depth, as you said, it was in late 2024. It was its 25th anniversary episode. And what has changed for Donkey Kong 64 since then? What has changed for the series since then? Quite a bit. We have now entered the new era officially. And when we discussed the 25th anniversary, this was before the game was available via NSO. This was before Bonanza was even announced, before we were even for sure that Nintendo EPD was doing 3D Donkey Kong. And we talked a lot about the sort of afterlife of Donkey Kong 64. You know, the ghost grandma coming through the door in the lobby. We talked about how fans were keeping interest in the game alive through the use of the Donkey Kong 64 randomizer online, through the speedrunning culture, and on down to just Donkey Kong historians like the two of us. And that's all well and good, but I did not think less than 2 years later we would be at the point where Nintendo would be celebrating Donkey Kong 64 to the extent that they are.
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, all of that fan stuff that we talked about, that's still going really strong, and we don't have to get into it on this episode. But, you know, like I was just listening earlier today to our old episode, and when I talked about the randomizer, I was like, oh yeah, I mean, things don't really work exactly the same anymore because it's continued to grow and evolve, and the standard settings people use have changed, but still very healthy community, only growing really. But now you've got all that, and you also have Nintendo themselves saying, you know, we want people to think about this game. We want people to remember it. And honestly, you know, we talked about the question that has always been in the air, like, would Nintendo ever remake Donkey Kong 64? And we both came to the conclusion that we didn't really think that was likely. And we would rather just see a new game, especially a new 3D platformer, which is exactly what we got. But I didn't expect, honestly, EPD's rumored new Donkey Kong game to really acknowledge Donkey Kong 64 at all if they weren't going to make a remake of it. Right. You know, I figured that this would not be a game that, you know, even like say you got K. Rool back in it, that would be one thing, but you're not going to get acknowledgement of like Lanky Kong in this new game. Like, come on. And boy, though, did we.
Yeah, I think even after K. Rool got into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and they referenced Donkey Kong 64 to the extent they did, with, his boxing glove, but also the final smash that basically fulfills the game over scene from Donkey Kong 64, like carries it to fruition with him blowing off the face of the island. I thought, well, they have to reference that because K. Rool has only had so many iconic appearances. I mean, all of them iconic to the fans, but the references to pull from, they're kind of concise, so you want to get it all in there for the most part. I didn't think, like you, that DKEPD would go as hard as it did celebrating Donkey Kong 64. And one of my theories about why Donkey Kong 64 had not come to Nintendo Classics, had not come to Nintendo Switch Online, was because they didn't want to put this, let's face it, divisive 3D Donkey Kong game out before they potentially released a new 3D Donkey Kong game that was supposed to be the big kickoff of this new era of internally developed and managed Donkey Kong. And I think I might have been right there a little bit, because we didn't get DK64 on NSO until almost a year after Bonanza, which feels about right, because you're not going to do any potential damage at this point by putting it out there, but you do have a lot more people interested in the series and who definitely want to check out the big, historic moments, especially this game, because this game kind of has a legacy and a legend unto itself. And I do think they were kind of holding back for that reason. Another reason is, as I mentioned before, the NSO team is smaller than you might think, and the amount of resources and the amount of time they have to get classic titles on there, it's not as robust as one would assume. And the third reason, and the probably biggest reason that's kind of related to the second one, is that they would have to make sure Donkey Kong 64 runs well enough on this platform before signing off on it.
Mm-hmm. Actually, there's one thing I wanted to ask you about, which is something that I've heard brought up from time to time, which is that Nintendo, and obviously they had it on the Wii U, but like that there was some like rights issues with Jetpack being in the game. Like, do you know anything about how that works out? I mean, since Rare already put it in DK64, it essentially kind of is part of the code already, and so Nintendo owns this version of Jetpack. Is that just how it is?
I am not up on the legal fine print every time they put a classic Rare game on a modern Nintendo platform. So I don't want to speak out of turn on that. I know a little bit, but only so much as far as I think every time they do release a Rare game that was just developed by Rare, even if Nintendo technically like owns the rights to that title, I think they do have to negotiate something with Rare, which is easier than it ever has been before. It's just basically, oh yeah, we want this one. Oh, okay, yeah, sign this. Okay, done. So like, I don't think it's a big deal anymore. It seemed like a big deal in the Wii U because of that, because we're like, oh, but Jetpack, and Microsoft would allow that, and now we have Sea of Thieves on PlayStation, and Xbox has internally imploded as a brand, so nobody cares anymore. But yeah, I'm not really sure how the Jetpack issue works, if that is a holdup, but I do know, or I do assume, that even if Nintendo mostly owns everything in the game, they still have to get some sort of sign off from Rare, even if it's just down to the code that was used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so, this is post-Banjo-Kazooie, post-Banjo-Tooie on NSO. There really aren't any surprises anymore. So this one always felt like an inevitability. We were going to get DK64 on NSO eventually. The only thing that potentially held it back were the technical hiccups that were really apparent on the Wii U. And I do want to discuss the Wii U version in a little bit and how this one compares. But first of all, can we just say how great Donkey Kong 64 both looks and runs on Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2? I don't know about Nintendo Switch. I've only been playing it on Switch 2, but oh my god.
Yeah, I actually did my replay of it on the original Switch, although I was playing it in the docked mode and streaming it, and it looks great. And then I was actually today messing around with it on the Switch too, and it of course looks just as good, if not even better. But yeah, it looks beautiful. And you know, looking at these rich colors and the textures and everything, you can, even I like was making out little details that I had never really noticed before, like say in the background of Funkies or Candy's shops or something, just some textures back there that it's easier than ever to see, especially in the widescreen and stuff too.
Yeah, it's funny because when you get a classic game from the 90s, and I know this was the tail end of the 90s, but it still applies, and you like blow it up on a modern HD television, and you know, it wasn't designed to be viewed like that. And so, you know, the Donkey Kong Country trilogy is a classic example of why you maybe shouldn't do that, or why that was never the intention. And I think they look fine, but if somebody who didn't grow up with them looks at them, they're going to be like, people thought these graphics were good, really? But I'm kind of amazed at how great Donkey Kong 64 still looks, like how it holds up. And honestly, like, I think this looks better than it did on a CRTV. I think, like, in HD, I am more impressed with DK64's visuals than I've ever been.
I agree. Like, the thing people make a big deal out of, like, oh, you should play it on the original CRT, that mostly goes for, like, sprite-based games, because especially something like Donkey Kong Country, the pre-rendered sprites actually do look a lot nicer with that sort of blending effect you get from a CRT. But for, you know, a lot of N64 games, provided that you don't get too many weird emulation quirks that make the polygons look wacky, I think they benefit a lot from the HD treatment, and, you know, getting to view them on a modern screen.
Just the lighting in this game is still kind of bewildering how they pulled it off. Like, I know we always make fun of the swinging lanterns in the hallways of the game and just how extra everything is, but for a game that really leaned into cartoony slapstick for Donkey Kong, there is still a lot of moody ambiance throughout the adventure, and I forget sometimes, and I forget just how impressive this game visually and in its audio actually is. I think, you know, we always look to the Banjo-Kazooie duology on the N64 for like the tight, crunchy controls, and then we might look to Conker's Bad Fur Day for just like audio and visual splendor, just a technical marvel for what they're able to pull off. But DK64 is no slouch in that latter department.
Oh yeah, it's the colors, the lighting, it's a treat for the eyes, I think.
Yeah, so been really just rediscovering that and reminding myself just how beautiful it is, but it also just controls so much better on the Switch family of consoles than it ever did on the Wii U. And I know the option, if you have the Nintendo 64 controller for the Switch or Switch 2, that's just like putting on a comfortable old glove. Like, it just, oh yeah, like this is the way it's supposed to feel. But even using the Joy-Con 2, I'm able to really play the game. It feels a little bit clunky until I get used to the controls, until I like reorient my muscle memory. But yeah, I'm really just enjoying playing it in handheld mode in a way that I could never get the hang of using the Wii U's gamepad.
Yeah, so I'll have to defer to you on the Wii U version, because I actually never bought it on the Wii U. Before I was DK Vine's official DK64 correspondent, I saw no reason to buy it on the Wii U, because even though I did buy a lot of Virtual Console Wii U games, I didn't need to do that for DK64 because I could just play it on my N64 anytime I wanted. And I had heard bad things about that version of the game, so I didn't go out of my way to get it. So, you know, I am pretty well educated about what specifically was broken about that version, what makes some things so difficult in it, but I've never actually played it myself.
Yeah. Well, you aren't missing much. Well, actually, like, let me just talk really quick about some of the flaws of the Wii U version. Courtney, I provided you a screenshot that I took on the Wii U of everybody's favorite nipple pierced pig trough, and it looked so dim. It looked so flat on the Wii U. Like, the visuals just did not pop. It looked poorly emulated. And I don't know, it was like something is wrong with your TV's backlight. Like, it's just, I can't even describe how desaturated it sometimes felt on the Wii U.
I looked up videos of the Wii U version to just prepare myself a little bit, and I was like, why does it look so, like, washed out? Why does it look so dark? I don't understand.
A lot of the eShop, the Virtual Console releases on the Wii U also look like that. DK64 wasn't the only one. Like, some of the DS games on the Wii U also had that just grimy look. And I don't know what it was about the Wii U hardware that made successful emulation impossible for those. But yeah,
there's also another theory, which is when we talk about the changes they made in the Switch version, they darkened a whole bunch of textures, and apparently this is an anti-epilepsy measure. But because they didn't make those kinds of edits on the Wii U, maybe their solution was just to make the whole game darker and call it a day. I don't know.
That actually might be a legitimate reason why, yeah. But they definitely did it with more care on this. And yeah, the controls were just awful with the Wii U hardware. Like, you didn't have the option of plugging in a Nintendo 64 controller. Like, it was maybe marginally better with a Pro controller, but the problem was it felt so broken on the Wii U. And a large part of that was because in the original cartridge, on the original release on the Nintendo 64, Rare accommodated quite a bit for hardware lag. And there are points in the game where you get just slowdown, and they tweaked it to handle the slowdown, so it wouldn't be a disadvantage. But the problem is, if it's running on slicker, more modern hardware, then you don't have that slowdown, and everything becomes nearly impossible to do. Not impossible, but nearly impossible. Specifically, the Mad Jack boss fight was a big one.
Yeah, so funny thing, in this version they actually did go out of their way to induce lag in certain areas and certain minigames. I do not think Mad Jack was edited though, so he's still pretty hard. I definitely feel like I had a little bit more of a difficult time fighting him than I normally would. Because this is the first time I have ever played DK64 not on the original hardware. I've never played any kind of emulated version of it whatsoever. Even when it comes to the randomizer, I have my magical ways of playing it on the actual N64. So yeah, a lot of this stuff that was just a little bit faster than I'm used to kind of threw me off.
Yeah. I will never pick up the Wii U version again unless I have to document it for a video or something. It's just, I never want to look at that piece of trash version of DK64 ever again. And it's no wonder, like, that was when a lot of DK64 hatred seemed to ramp up when people were playing it on the Wii U for the first time. Because what a terrible first impression it makes there. But on the Switch and Switch 2, as we said, native widescreen mode.
Yes.
I never used this. I never even consider this a possibility in 1999. It's kind of what also blew me away with Banjo-Tooie coming to the Switch, was actually getting to utilize the widescreen mode for the first time, because I didn't have a widescreen TV in 1999. Nobody I knew had a widescreen TV in 1999. Why would I ever use that? And so it just sort of cemented in my brain that the default aspect ratio was how DK64 was supposed to look. And if I saw it in widescreen, I would be like, that's wrong. And I'm not just talking about when people stretch it out to fit the screen, but it's horrible looking, but this is just native widescreen. It's what Rare programmed into it, and you can utilize it here on the Switch and Switch 2.
Yeah, it's really neat. The only thing is I don't think there's a way to make it stay in that mode. So every time you turn the game back on, you have to remember to put the widescreen mode back on. There was actually one session I did. It took me 4 sessions to beat, and they were each about 4 hours long. So about 16 hours total to get through it, and 101%. And one time I forgot to put the widescreen back on, and I was like, I didn't realize it till afterwards. And I was like, dang it. But if you remember, it's a cool thing.
You can also...
And you can always just load your save states as well. But
that's what I was going to say, yeah.
I didn't do that.
Yeah, it does save the widescreen mode in a save state, so that's just usually what I pull up. And, we had save states on the Wii U, so, that's not new, but the ease in which you can jump into this and then take screenshots and video, I have been abusing that screenshot button since I got a Switch 2, but specifically Donkey Kong Bananza really trained my brain to screenshot everything. Always have a finger over that button. And when I was playing Donkey Kong Bananza, in service of then doing a Kongversation episode about each world, and Traveler of the Stars is in a live stream, will yell at me for not doing a separate episode on the Divide. But look, I can do quite a bit with very little. I'm going to do an episode about the Alarmo very soon. I still don't know how I would have done a full episode about the Divide. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I'm not that incredible with my Donkey Kong nonsense spewing abilities. But yeah, just taking screenshots that are just then right there on your Switch 2, and you can then just upload it to the app and then put it on your phone and in your iCloud if that's your thing, and then use it wherever. But the handheld mode, oh my god, I knew once I got this game in handheld mode, all of the petty little frustrations I had would melt away. It's similar to what happened with me with Tooie, where the sort of daunting weight of how big the game is doesn't feel as omnipresent when you can just play it wherever, whenever, and then just turn it off and then resume it. No problem. I don't need to sit in front of a TV to play this. I can just play this in bed late at night, or, it's such a refreshing way to approach DK64, where it doesn't necessarily have to be a commitment. You can just take little bites here and there.
Yeah, I think that's great. And another thing, you were talking about recording and videos and stuff, and also save states. You can, I believe this only works on the Switch too, but you can rewind now. And that's normally something I would be a purist about, it's cheating to use rewind, but I think there's some instances in this game where I really wouldn't blame you, and especially when it comes to something like the DK arcade. You can make a save state at the beginning of the arcade, so you don't have to watch DK pull the lever again every time you lose and get booted out of it. I think that would be acceptable. There's just a bunch of little things like that I think will maybe take the edge off of some of the more frustrating, even the parts that are just down to the lack of lag and the fact that this game can be a little more difficult than it was originally intended to be on modern hardware versus the N64. I'm normally a bit of a purist when it comes to that for myself, but if other people want to use the rewind to get around some of this game's more like bullshit mini games and stuff, I think that's acceptable and understandable and can help people get into the game that otherwise might be intimidated by stuff like the DK Arcade or Beaver Bother or anything like that.
The joke's on you. I have a save state where DK's about to pull the lever just so I can watch DK pull the lever whenever I want.
Yeah, you when the arcade starts to pop up, you just load the save state again and just watch him pull the lever just like 10 times in a row. That's what you're here for.
I really just need to turn it into a GIF at this point. Just Andre says, half of my Switch 2 album is full of screenshots and videos I took of all of the various games I played over the full lifetime of the Switch 1. The second half is screenshots and videos almost exclusively of Bonanza. Like, yeah, I took screenshots for the Switch 1, but I think just the ease and convenience on the Switch 2, and then the amount of stuff in Bonanza that I wanted to commit to memory ASAP. Let me just pull it up right now. Let me just see how many photos I've taken.
Yeah, mine is like my Switch 2, it's like 10 screenshots of Mario Kart World, and then like I didn't even take that many pictures of Bonanza when I was going through it because I was streaming it. But then it's like 10,000 pictures of King K. Rool.
Yeah, 10,367, and most of that is Bonanza. Some of that is Mario Kart World. And the rest is like Mario Tennis Fever when that came out. Yuka Replayly, and then Donkey Kong 64. I just, like a sea of Donkey Kong 64 stuff for now. And, it's really hard though, because the way the dialogue unspools in DK64, this is why I would want to use Rewind, because if you want to get that perfect screenshot, it's very hard with the dialogue, because then you'll just have an errant letter that has popped up, like, you press it too late, and so you've got like the start of the next sentence, but the whole full sentence hasn't filled in, and so you're like, well, I don't want that. I need to go back and try again, and then before you know it, you've got like 40 screenshots of the same dialogue bubble.
Yeah, I was actually trying to get a screenshot of Donkey all confused, but it goes away so quickly that I just got a screenshot of like the speech bubble disappearing. If you take a video, you can go into the video and save a frame of the video.
I know. But I like the sport of it. It's like, fair. Just getting that perfect screenshot, timing it just right. You're like, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, it's like a Pokemon Snap. You might enjoy that game.
I don't know. Maybe if it was something like
Donkey Kong Snap.
Yeah, DK Wildlife Safari. I don't know. Like, just an idea there, So anyway, finally, multiplayer now has the added option of playing it online.
Yes, I have not actually indulged in this at all yet, but, I've had offers, and so eventually, now that I've unlocked Crusha for myself, I can get back out there as Yellow Crusha.
I've had offers as well. I annoy people because they're like, we should play Donkey Kong 64 multiplayer, or we should do this or that, playing video games together, and I'm like, it's Stinky Ape Summer Week. I'm going to be busy writing and talking about video games. I don't have time to play video games. And that's mostly the case with my life. Like, I do DK Vine as my day job, and then I hit the point where I don't want to think about video games. So I have not actually tried out the multiplayer yet, but I'm eager to. Just because DK64 was from a time of my life where I started to not just sit around with friends in real life and play whatever video games were in front of us. So it's one of those times where I was just gravitating more and more to single player experiences, which is always my preference. And I always played those with friends, especially if there was a co-op mode like in DKC. But it's just, yeah, I never got to actually sit around with in-person buddies and to try out the multiplayer for DK64 or Banjo-Tooie for that matter.
Yeah, I pretty much exclusively played it as a kid with my little brother because I just didn't really have many friends who wanted to play DK64 Monkey Smash with me. Dang it.
Well, beyond just the perks of having it on NSO and how great it looks and feels and runs, they have tweaked it a little bit. And I'm not fully up on everything they've changed, but you are the person to ask.
Yes. So I got to give credit to like the randomizer community and the speedrunning community who figured out most of this stuff pretty much right away. In particular, Balam, who is one of the devs of DK64 Randomizer, Ballaam. He put together a very nice thread of all of the changes. And, you know, I don't need to go through like every single thing. There really aren't that many. But it's just basically some mini games had some lag induced to make them like Crazy Kong Clamor is the one where all the Kongs appear and then there's also a banana and you have to shoot the banana and then it all disappears and everyone changes places and you have to find the banana and shoot the banana again. Apparently this one was extremely difficult to the point of like being impossible for a human on the Wii U version because it just happens so fast. Like the Kongs and the banana will show up for like 1 second and then they'll be gone and then it's the next one. Like you can't react to this.
Right.
And so people would be like, oh, I had to pause buffer or whatever. So they made this, it's still pretty fast, but they did like cap the frame rate or something. They definitely interfered with this minigame to make it doable by a human. Peril Path Panic and Busy Barrel Barrage, which I believe is the one where like you're shooting the Kremlings that are trying to come get you. Peril Path Panic is the one where the claptraps are eating the fairies. Those also had lag put into them. A very interesting one is that the second beetle race, the one in Crystal Caves, they just made the beetles slower. They put them at 83% of their original speed. They didn't interfere with the Angry Aztec one at all, which I personally think that one's harder because it's a lot easier to fall off the edge, in my opinion. But the Crystal Cave one is, I would say it's a bit easier than it is on N64 now, but it is not by any means like free because getting all the coins is still the hard part. Beating the beetle on its own is not that difficult, but having to keep your distance from the beetles so that you don't run into them and lose your coins and stuff like that. It's really just getting the coins that's hard there now. And an interesting one is that, I don't know if you know about this, but the demos that play at the beginning of the game when you just turn it on, that just show the Kongs doing various things, little preview of the game. Yep. So the one with Donkey Kong himself and Jungle Japes, they programmed it, but the way the game runs faster on the Wii U version, he's supposed to like jump out and grab a Hellavine and then like swing across to the other side, but it doesn't work right in the Wii U version. He just like misses the vine and just falls into the water and the rest of the demo doesn't work correctly. And they actually accommodated for that here so that it does work correctly. So the things sync up correctly the way it's supposed to, and he grabs the vine and swings to the other side. And they also did some syncing for the intro story cutscene so that the music and the like voice acting doesn't get out of sync with what's happening. So yeah, there was a lot of care put into especially those like important things. As mentioned before, a lot of textures are darkened in the game, like some lava textures, some just random like barrel background textures. So this might have been some kind of anti-epilepsy measure, I suppose, to prevent there from being like too many like various contrasting colors or brightnesses against each other. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the main stuff. They didn't touch some of the things that you might think they would. I don't believe the rabbit races were changed at all. Like I said, the Angry Aztec beetle race also untouched. And something that's a little bit infamous is that K. Rool's toes are a little hard to handle. They move pretty fast.
Yeah, they are.
They did not slow down those toes. Those toes can move.
The illogical wrong number of toes in K. Rool's shoes. Yeah. Yeah, I've spent so much of my life trying to both rationalize and explain away those toes. And then you start to really question what you're doing with your life.
Yeah, well, me too, but I just embraced it instead, you know?
That's pretty much the spirit you have to go into with anything Donkey Kong 64. You know what? Just embrace it. You'll feel a lot better about yourself afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, another anti-epilepsy measure is that the lightning in the game, which occurs in places like the Armadillo battle and just like the stormy area in Jungle Japes, they did reduce that a bit, the frequency and the brightness of it.
I noticed that it's not as startling because that's one area I was kind of examining, and specifically the rainy area in Jungle Japes where, you know, Cranky's lab is. And I was like, yeah, the lightning feels like it's been muted, or like a frame of it is missing. Like the brightest flash of it is gone. Which I understand. Like, that's one of the things I can't get upset about. I'm very much somebody who's all about historical preservation and keeping things as faithful to the original release, especially on a platform like Nintendo Classics, Nintendo Switch Online. I want that experience to be the same as it was. But the anti-epilepsy measures, completely understand. A lot more conscious about that kind of stuff now than anybody was in the 90s.
Yeah, it was a very common thing in N64 games, I've noticed. Like, a lot of them have this insane lightning effects. Glover is really bad about that. It's like, they had no chill back in the day, just like flashbanging you all the time.
Glimmer in DKC 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is also something, you know, that they did tweak on the NSO versions of, you know, Glimmer and Squawks of those games.
It's funny, though, because the whole reason I learned what an epileptic seizure was from the stories about the Pokemon anime in Japan causing them. And so it was, in a roundabout way, Nintendo who first educated me what they were in the 90s at a time when their games were full of bright, sudden flashes. So... Yeah.
Justice for Porygon. You know, everyone knows that it's the Porygon episode, but apparently it was really Pikachu that causes the bright flashing in that episode.
Never trusted Pikachu. I have
to
say,
me neither.
Like, I'm always that contrarian, even as a kid. The most marketed, popular character in a franchise, the face of a franchise, I was like, well, you're not my favorite. Don't try to sell this character on me. I'm going to pick my favorite. And so,
Hyle hates Donkey Kong, famously.
Okay. I love Donkey Kong, but Donkey Kong is not my favorite Kong.
That's true. Me neither.
Yeah, I'm a Diddy and Dixie kid, so I've really come around to appreciate Donkey Kong, especially with Bonanza. Like, I really love Donkey Kong, but yeah, like, once upon a time, I would have even said, oh yeah, I like Lanky Kong more than Donkey Kong.
Yeah, speaking honestly, Donkey Kong was always one of my least favorite Kongs until Bonanza. He was just kind of like the straight man, you know. He was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. He's a little boring compared to everyone else who's got more interesting quirks. But man, Bonanza just makes him so endearing.
To be fair, I've always liked Donkey Kong more as kind of that everyman character more than I do like Mario.
Mm-hmm.
Because
DK has like some stuff going on. He's a chill dude, you know.
He's got a bit of an edge, and he can be portrayed as either a really cool, laid-back dude or a complete village idiot, like in Donkey Kong 64.
Yeah, I'm all confused how people would get that impression.
Well, and then, like, when he's talking to Kay Lumsey after that scene, he's like, Donkey, help Kay Lumsey.
Yeah, he and Chunky speak in third person.
Well, it's like, what were you doing? Like, it's not like you didn't have reference material on which to base this character on. Your own studio did it better a couple of years prior to this. Everybody else is written pretty well. Even Funky, who many people think is out of character in this game. Like, if you could just get past the overly militaristic image. Like, he's making non-lethal fruit weaponry. It's not as severe as it initially seems, but like, I think everybody is pretty true to themselves in this game, except for Donkey Kong, and you really have to squint to get past that. Thankfully, he doesn't have much dialogue.
Yeah, well, K. Lumsey also talks in third person, so maybe he was just trying to get on his level,
Yeah, I think that was our explanation back in the day, to kind of hand wave away how out of character Donkey Kong is written. It's like,
although, he actually only talks in, K. Lumsey only talks in third person sometimes. Like, he doesn't do it all the time, but he does, half and half.
Like, we said Donkey All Confused was Donkey Kong, like, putting on just, oh, Donkey All Confused. Like, he's just being self-deprecating there. And then he was just mirroring K. Lumsey, kind of as a dig. And that's how we slept at night.
You gotta sleep at night somehow, whatever it takes.
Yeah, Traveler says, look, he got back on the right path. He did. He's pretty well written in Bonanza, I would say.
Yeah, and he does have a Donkey All Confused reference.
He does, so they can poke fun at it. But Donkey Kong 64 does have amazing writing, but it's mostly the instruction manual, and I do wish the digital version of that was available. Nintendo has done very little as far as preserving classic instruction manuals, in the same way that they've started to do with their game library. There are some that are preserved on their website. The original Donkey Kong Country manual from 1994, it's on Nintendo's website in just high resolution, but none of the later games are from this time period. And Donkey Kong 64 is, I think, one of my favorite manuals of the whole Rare tenure with the series.
Yeah, people in chat are pointing out something that I did know, which is Nintendo of Europe has the DK64 manual on their official website.
Is it black and white?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah,
isn't the actual manual black and white?
No, the NTSC version is in full color.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I want that one. I want the full color version.
Well, we take what we can get. At least we can still appreciate the writing, even if it's in black and white.
Yeah, the writing. So this was Lee Loveday. Dan Allison wasn't doing the Rare manuals at this point in time. So this is just the full, unleashed penmanship of Lee Loveday. And this was the classic era of the Rareware website. And so you really got just the whole manual written as Cranky Kong is writing it. And so in the Super Nintendo Donkey Kong Country games, you would have those pop-ups with Cranky, but this whole manual is written from Cranky's perspective, so you get a lot of nice little character work for Cranky in there.
Yeah, I love this manual, but also it's so mean.
It's very mean. It's I think Lee wrote a meaner Cranky. I think Cranky is at his meanest in DKC2 and in the DK64 manual.
Yeah. But it's extremely funny. It's mean, but he digs at Chunky all the time specifically. I feel bad for Chunky.
Yeah. It's also the manual that explains, Chunky is Kitty's brother, Tiny is Dixie's sister. It does a lot of world building work that the game either doesn't have room to get into or just doesn't bother.
Yeah, the game doesn't have a character parade. As we discussed last time, most of these characters don't have names. Actually, just last night on my stream, someone was asking me what the Kremlings with the big clubs are called, and I was like, he was like, what's the fan name for them? I was like, oh, but they have a real name. It's Cautious. That's official. And I was like, I actually don't know how I know that, but I've always known that. And then we established that it's in the manual.
It's in the manual,
when it talks about, Crystal Caves calls them Cautious specifically.
Yeah, so many of the enemies and NPCs didn't get official names, but we do have Kashas and we do have Kazplats. Or Kazsplats.
Kazsplats, what the heck? That's worse than Rolescoid, man. It's Kasplat. They say it.
I know,
Kasplat.
but it's like, it's one of those things where it doesn't really roll off the tongue compared to other Kremlings. I feel
Kasplat rolls off the tongue just fine.
No, because it literally falls off your tongue and hits the floor and makes a splat noise. I don't like it.
Because they slam the ground. They hit the floor really hard. I know what they do.
I know what they do, but also they're like big buff, like Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilder types, and I hear the splat, and I'm thinking, did they take too much steroids and it's causing incontinence?
All right, well,
I have my reasons, okay?
Okay, I never would have guessed that was a name that, like, Rolescoid. Yeah, that does not roll escoid off the tongue, but Kasplat, I never would have guessed you'd have a problem with that one.
Look, it's also a name I never really say out loud often. It's not like it comes up frequently. Like, I'm invited in to jury duty, and they ask me to talk about the Kremlings from Donkey Kong 64. And then I say it wrong, and I get dismissed.
It comes up all the time for me, so I guess I'm just used to it.
So I did have some random thoughts about DK64 that I jotted down over the past couple of weeks. These aren't profound. These are more just, hey, what the heck? Or, oh yeah, I remember that. And I actually only have a few, but I wanted to bring them to your attention because I am, especially this first one, I'm legitimately curious what the hell this thing is. And I don't know if you ever noticed it. So in the stormy area in Jungle Japes, where Cranky's lab is, where you can run around as Rambi, smashing huts, and all the naughties are hanging out, if you climb up on a palm tree and you look at the tree line, in the far distance, you can see a sparkly glint. It looks like a tag barrel from a distance, but it's up high. Have you ever noticed that? What the hell is that?
No, but there is something similar in Fungi Forest that I have noticed. It's in the area where the beanstalk grows, and it's like the exact same thing. What direction were you facing when you took this screenshot? Do you remember?
I'm facing, you face the entrance to the area, so back towards the tunnels.
Yeah, okay. So I think it probably just is a tag barrel, because the tag barrels were basically designed so you can see them from just about anywhere. Like, I don't know how they pulled it off, but the draw distance on the little star that marks where a tag barrel is, in particular, you can see it from pretty much anywhere. So as long as there's not something blocking it. And I would imagine this is probably the one that's like up high by Snide, and you're seeing like that.
And it's just bleeding through?
Yeah, like it's just because there's nothing in front of it, so you can see that from all the way over here.
I have stared at that. I've stared at that so many times since 1999, and like that's what I thought it was, or like for whatever reason, it's like a tag barrel they coated it and just stuck up there for some reason and forgot about it, and like I didn't know. My headcanon. Do you want to hear my headcanon?
Sure.
So you know, in Super Smash Bros. Melee, we have the Jungle Japes stage that looks nothing like Jungle Japes, and it has Cranky's lab that looks nothing like this Cranky's lab. So in my headcanon, that light is that version of Cranky's lab up high where the river is that we can't access from TK64.
Wow, it's just the guiding lights, I guess. But, I mean, I don't know for sure that's what it is, but I would just guess.
I mean, you're probably right, but I also, like, if I could access, I guess, like a free camera mode and just, like, get a high vantage point of the entire map of Jungle Japes, I'm sure I could pinpoint where that tag barrel is actually emanating from, but, yeah. My other thought is, I've always viewed Diddy as kind of coded as cocky and a little, like, bit of a teenage phase in this game, just the way he's animated and portrayed. But I noticed when you hover over Diddy in the tag barrel in this game, how all the Kongs get very excited when they think you're going to pick them, except Chunky.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like they wanted to animate Diddy doing a pelvic thrust, but then they thought better of it, but they kept his arms in that animation because he does this really weird, choo-choo double fist animation. And the only way that would read as making sense is if they also wanted him to thrust his hips, and they thought, hold on, he's still technically a minor, and this is a game that's going to be E for everyone. We probably shouldn't have the monkey character in this game thrust his crotch at the audience.
Yeah, leave that to Waluigi. But
well,
it's a very
Waluigi's a grown man. I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, leave it to him.
Yeah,
but anyway. It's a very odd animation. You're right. He's just kind of pumping his fists, but it doesn't. It's strange. It doesn't look like something anyone would ever do. Yeah. Well. Anyway.
Well, so I can't unsee it now. Whenever I go to pick Diddy, I'm like, Diddy, calm down. Calm down. Have some decency. Have some self-respect. You're going to regret this in 27 years. And then finally, this isn't so much a thought. This is just a proclamation. In the DK Vine Inner Circle the other day, I realized something. I said, DK Vine back in 1999, we came up with bullshit fanon names for all of the unnamed characters in Donkey Kong 64. And we have still used those to this day for lack of anything better. So we pretty much got all of the NPCs and even the enemy classes that didn't get official names, at least in Western materials. One character we overlooked was K. Rool's pet Claptrap, who he refers to as my scaly friend. And, this was obviously a Blofeld pastiche, James Bond, with the white cat and everything. But I was like, we just said, oh, it's a Claptrap, it doesn't matter. But it's like, no, if that is a Claptrap that is of significance to K. Rool, you would probably have a name. It's like Crunch in Diddy Kong Racing is a critter, but his name is also Crunch. So I was like, we never named this Claptrap. Holy shit. And I asked out loud, what should we call this? Claptrap. And then Jeff strolled in, as he does, and just said, Laptrap. And I felt so dumb that had never occurred to us since 1999.
Jeff did message me about this as well, because he was very proud of it and wanted me to know. I always like the name Kibble or Knibble. So you can compromise. You can be Kibble the Laptrap, but Laptrap is very, very good.
TJ says, is the idea of K. Rool having a pet Claptrap weird at all? Like in a Goofy and Pluto situation. Well, Claptraps, Clamp-ons, and Crimps have always kind of been coded as dog-like to kind of fit individual purposes. It's not necessarily consistent, but they're kind of viewed as sort of a lower evolutionary state of Kremling, maybe? Courtney, you might disagree with me here.
I would say that maybe Crimps are supposed to be kind of dog-like. They've got the collar and just the way they're designed. I wouldn't necessarily say that Claptraps and Clamp-ons were originally. They were, quadrupedal, and you could say what you want to about their status among Kremlings because of that. But I think this was the game that really, really leaned into the fact that they are little crocodile dogs. And, I think that's been kind of divisive. It's very cliche to just make something dog-like, but I always liked it because I thought it was cute, and it is cliche, but it's also kind of adorable. Although I will say this game really loves making you hurt claptraps and shoot claptraps, and every time they make that distressed dog whine, it's really upsetting.
Yeah. This is probably my least favorite appearance of claptraps, even compared to Donkey Kong Bonanza, when I couldn't even see the appearance of claptraps at first, which Traveler of the Stars is not letting me live down yet. But I'm okay with. I have different theories on Kremling evolution and the Kremling source, and like I like the idea that not maybe like some Kremlings didn't cook as long, and so they're not that far removed from just a crocodile. Like they're maybe like a little bit extra than a crocodile, but the crockheads and then the claptrap family, they might have more or greater intelligence, but they can still be stroked in the lap by K. Rool, and it's not weird.
Yeah, but what is interesting is that the claptrap in the wheel at the opening cutscene, it is described in the manual as being able to talk. So they can talk, but they are also still dog-like at the same time. So it is a little weird. I do think in some ways they're a little less evolved, or they fill this niche where they sort of become companions to the bipedal Kremlings, and they work in this sort of mutually advantageous relationship where maybe the claptraps and clampons and stuff need a little bit of extra help because they can't, they don't have opposable thumbs. Right. They can't do a lot of things that the more advanced Kremlings can do. And then, the other ones will kind of like look after them and protect them and stuff. So.
Yeah, I think the DKU does manage to skirt Goofy and Pluto situations just because you have things like Bananergy juicing different evolutionary tracks. You have googly eyes. You have all sorts of things that can hand wave away why some animals wear clothes and say cook burgers while others are just go around on all fours and get ridden like steeds.
Yeah, and something else is that this game really seems to imply that K. Rool has this very special affection for claptraps in particular. Like, not only does he have this one that he keeps as a lap trap, but he, like his special guards that he's always sending off after the other minions that are misbehaving. He's got a whole army of claptraps. He's got one really big one at least. Yeah. So I always thought that was cute. And guess what? When he came to Smash Bros, who did he take with him? He brought claptraps with him as his trophies. That's not right. Krusha, not Clump, not anybody else. Claptraps.
Claptraps and Crystal, but also starts with a K. So at least it's on brand. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot more we want to talk about as far as Donkey Kong 64 in light of Donkey Kong Bonanza, but I kind of want to close the episode on that robust discussion. So I want to go ahead and take the calls that we've received. And these were called in to the DK Vine hotline at 1-202-630-VINE. That's 8463. We got about 4 of them this time that we're going to play. And then we also have a comment that was sent over on Blue Sky. So let's go ahead and play that first call and see what they have to say.
Hello, Courtney. Hello, Hyle. This is Carl Max calling in for the DK64 on NSO episode. I do have a little bit of personal experience with this game, just being younger than if. My family had an N64, so I was able to mess around a bit with it. I did end up beating it when I was 6 years old or something, though I don't really blame my sort of post-toddler self. Anyways, there's lots of been said about DK64, so I guess we can talk a little bit about legacy since we're sort of honoring it. I think interestingly in some ways, this has been talked about on the show before. Some modern collectathon platformers, the ones that still exist, draw from DK64 and scale a little bit. Mario Odyssey, DK Bonanza, they both have tons of collectibles, more than DK64 by some counts, at least in terms of the main collectible. And the Zelda games kind of focus on this too, with having a bunch of just a bunch of different things that you can do. I think the main difference is in ease of access. So the idea is Mario Odyssey has a billion moons or whatever, but any individual one is going to take that much effort, and that was partially built with the Switch in mind, the idea that you could play portably. So even if you're playing for 2 or 3 minutes, say a moon gives you something productive that you can do in that time. And I think it's the future of games with this sort of scale, I think that 3D Mario is probably going to continue on that path. And the DK64's flaw is less in having a ton of collectibles, but more that each one, like, maybe it takes, like, similar effort that you would need to collect, like, a star in Mario 64 or something. Yeah, so that's beyond DK64. I really wish they added Beaver Bother as the DK challenge, so for taking the call.
Well, thank you for the call. Yeah, so this is something that is, I think, readily apparent, especially in light of Bonanza. You know, a Bananium gem, there's 1,000 of them, and that should feel far more daunting, but it's just much more matter of fact in Bonanza, and you don't need to go through the whole process that you do in Donkey Kong 64 of collecting a golden banana. And, you know, not everybody likes that. Some people like the pomp and circumstance and the feeling of importance when you click that collectible. And maybe you don't get that with the moons in Odyssey or the Bananium gems in Bonanza, that you do a golden banana or a Jiggy in Banjo-Kazooie. I personally don't mind, though, and I think it's a good way to keep it breezy in flow versus the more stop-start nature of Donkey Kong 64, which isn't as bad as the stop-start nature of Super Mario 64, where you get yoinked out of a world whenever you collect the big collectible. But it is a bit much in DK64 still.
Yeah, I mean, people always talk about the sheer amount of collectibles in DK64, but that's not really the problem. The problem is that there are essentially 5 sets of collectibles that, you know, each can only be picked up with a certain character, and that's what makes it so annoying. Like, even now, there's the randomizer broke my brain a little bit, so when I was doing my replay, I would just defeat a Kasplat and try to grab the blueprint and be like, oh, never mind, that's I'm playing as Donkey Kong, and that is Lanky's Kasplat. Sorry, I have to come back with Lanky.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, that is the problem, not just the number, but the fact that the collectibles are character locked. And it would be understandable if some of them were, but, like, I don't know. I think any Kong should be able to pick up a blueprint. I don't know why they're allergic to things that aren't the specific color that they've approved. Like, you can pick it up and go take it to the other Kong. I don't know.
As much as I like seeing the multicolored bananas, I think it's a fun visual. It does wear thin after a bit, and, like, you almost have to approach it just, each world is a different world. Just go in with a Kong and just focus on what that Kong can do. Like, I don't know how different people divide up the workflow in Donkey Kong 64, you know, to make it tolerable to them. That's the way I do it, though. It's like, all right, Jungle Japes, I'm just Donkey Kong. And then I do all the stuff I can do with Donkey Kong, and it's like, okay, Jungle Japes, I'm Diddy. And then you move on to Angry Aztec, and then you unlock, you know, Tiny and Lanky, and just... it's not very elegant. And as much as I have come back around on DK64 and its charms, I don't think even its most stalwart defenders could ever say it was an elegantly designed game.
Yeah, it's kind of like 5 intersecting games that all exist on top of each other at once.
Yeah. And you definitely understand how they got there from its messy development and how the original vision of the game changed midstream. And this was basically just out of kind of panic and desperation, let's do Banjo-Kazooie, but bigger. And that was never really going to work. But that being said, there is a joy in collecting stuff still. Like, as much of a dirty word as collectathon has become, partly because of the critical reception or revisionist critical reception towards Donkey Kong 64, I still like collecting things in video games. It's very satisfying.
I agree. And, you know, I think that was even more important back in the early days of 3D gaming, when just moving around in a 3D space was novel and fun. I think a lot of people don't look at it with that lens of, like, you know, back in the day, developers were just figuring this stuff out, but also gamers were just figuring this stuff out. So just being able to get around in a 3D world and having a lot of things lined up to guide you from place to place, that in itself was fun. It was just going on a big virtual treasure hunt.
Yeah, I do think everybody becoming kind of an armchair critic for all of the media they consume definitely has its downsides. And it's also just like maybe thinking too hard about some of this stuff. When I was playing Donkey Kong 64 initially, I did not worry about it in the slightest. Like, that's not really how you do video game design there, Rare. I was having fun. Like, there were frustrating bits, but I was having a good time, at least, for the first couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, I don't know. Everyone's got to have a take on video games these days, but I think we still have it on later on near the end to talk about like how DK64 is both loved and hated intensely. So we can save that for later.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for the call. Let's play our second caller.
Hello, DK Vine. This is TJ. Let's talk about DK64 getting added to the Switch Online app. I'm having fun with it. This is probably the best version of the game to play officially. It's nice that it looks and runs as good as it can, but I also think they went in and did some coding wizardry to make sure that, those key moments in minigames that need slowdown still have it. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, where it's not the Wii U version, but it's also not as laggy as the N64 version. So, yeah, that's really nice. One thing that the Switch Online app makes really cool is that when you're playing in multiplayer, even if you select single-player mode, there's a way to swap who is player one, almost like if you're sitting on the same couch and you pass the controller back and forth. And one thing I'm doing is that I was playing with my cousin, and we were playing the single-player mode together, but swapping off on who was which Kong. I was doing all of DK's tasks, he was doing all of Diddy's, and so, that, for a game with so much work to do, that can actually make it a little more fun in some ways if you divvy up the work like that. So that's one benefit of the Switch Online app. I will say, I don't think it does this game any favors for it to have come after both Banjos, because it is a little awkward, comparing it to something like Banjo-Tooie, where that game's widescreen looks a lot better and is actually remembered. You don't have to select widescreen every time you play it, and Banjo-Tooie offered so much more in terms of its cheat codes and how you customize your experience. So, like I said, this is the best version of DK64 it could possibly be, short of like, the Star Fox 2026 team doing a remake of it. But, yeah, I am having fun. I'm glad it's finally here. Thanks for taking the call.
Well, thank you for the call, TJ, who's also here in the chat with us.
Yeah, it's finally here, performing for you.
Yes. You're talking about even single player, you can kind of pass off the controller. And that's one benefit of NSO that I haven't really exploited yet. That would be fun to do. One of the great joys in my childhood was playing the Donkey Kong Country games and even the land games with my buddies, like doing two-player team, and then when two-player team is not an option, just passing the control when it's their preferred Kong. So I would always be Diddy, or then I inherited Kitty, but Donkey Kong 64, I never really had that opportunity, and I also kind of lament that they could never get kind of a co-op mode working. Like, early on, that was the plan, was to do, like, the tag team mechanic, but you just got ridiculous visuals of one Kong ragdolling behind the other, and I cut that before too long in development, and then implemented an early version of the tag barrel, I believe. But it was still just Donkey and Diddy at that point. But yeah, I really think it's a shame that we couldn't get some actual like multiplayer, single player on the cartridge back in the day, especially with so many Kongs and so many controller ports on the N64. It would have potentially made this more interesting and would have set it apart from its contemporaries like Banjo-Kazooie or Super Mario 64.
Yep. Also, I know TJ must like this game because Squawks is so heavily involved.
Yeah, this is I think that, yeah, this is the first instance of Squawks not being a like rideable or transformable animal buddy, but still having an outsized presence. And that would carry over into the retro years.
Yep. And he shows up all the time. He's always dropping down to give you some hints and tell you what to do next.
Yeah, this is the first game that can establishes the Squawks can talk, albeit, I guess, as a parrot. This game kind of fudges that quite a bit because Squawks is quite verbose here, but later games really just lead into him talking like a pet store parrot.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm disappointed. Bonanza didn't bring back him speaking fully because I think, say what you will about Posh Ramby or whatever, but this game pretty definitively establishes that Squawks can just talk normally unless Cranky told him exactly what he's supposed to say and then he just goes and repeat. Maybe that's what's going on, but I don't like that interpretation, so.
I kind of love that interpretation though. That
Dang it.
Squawks is a very good mimic and can actually give you a full Cranky Kong rant. Maybe Squawks edits out all the insults, but
yeah, he says it in Cranky's voice too.
Yeah. I mean, we know Cranky and Squawks have some sort of relationship, as does Squawks and Funky at a certain point. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible. But yeah, like, I'm always wanting to steer clear of Posh Ramby, but you're right. This game does establish that Squawks can speak in some sort of parrot dialect. So, yeah, you just have to roll with it. All right. Should we play the third call?
Hello, this is Traveler of the Stars calling in about Donkey Kong 64 on NSO. Hyle, you're looking great as always. Hope you're doing well. Hope your family's doing well. Courtney, welcome back after your long epic with Hyle. Everyone go watch Courtney's streams. Go follow Ultra Mentality. She's great. You can tune in for iconic streams like Sphinx. If you want to know what that is, head on over. The Kremling chronology, which should include Returns in Tropical Freeze. We'll find a crocodile somewhere. But let's get into it. So I had never played DK64. As I've always said, I'm a DS and Wii era youngin, and I had a Wii U, but N64 games did not look good on Virtual Console, so I did not get those games, and I did not really play many N64 games until NSO. So I have not completed the game. I'm sorry, Courtney. I know I'm sorry. I know I failed you, but in my defense, I'm busy, and also DK64 is a pretty dense game. But I have been having a lot of fun. I think for me, Courtney, and I know you may gouge my eyes out, you may disagree with me here. For me, 'cause I know you told me to 100% it. And I guess I'll say, like, for people who have not played it yet, I think there is kind of a thing, like with Mario Odyssey, or like Mario Sunshine, or games like that, where it's like, I have to get 100%. And it's like, you can if you want, but it's not required. I don't think a lot of games intend for people to get 100%. And I kind of feel like people should move on when they are not having fun. If you're not having fun getting 100% in DK64, if you want to play Gloomy Galleon for longer, then just don't play it more, But yeah, I do think that the game is a lot of fun. It's a lot denser than Bonanza, weirdly enough. Just all the characters and all of the weapons. Honestly, the controls were kind of hard for me to get my head around. But it is really charming. And I just think it's cool that DK64 has been respected so much in Bonanza. As a fan of a certain polite porker that gets a lot of hate, it must be gratifying just to see things that are a little bit more controversial be brought back. So I'm happy that DK64 kind of has this new lease on life, and I'm excited to see how it's expected going forward. Keep up the great work, you two. See ya.
Well, thank you for the call, and I agree, you don't need to get 100% in Donkey Kong 64. You need to get 101% in Donkey Kong 64. That is the only way to experience this game, and I stand by that.
Honestly, no, you can get 100% so you can see the good K. Lumsey cutscene at the end, but you don't have to get 101% so you don't have to see the cursed audition cutscene.
The Donkey Kong Jungle Beat auditions where everybody but Donkey Kong fails to get in the game.
Yeah, and you know what? After that performance, I understand.
Yeah.
But I mean, K. Rool should have made it in based on that cutscene, though, because his little patty cake he was doing with DK was really cute.
No, K. Rool's like, I'm gonna go hang out in some Payon games and then fall in a hole.
Yeah, he did that. No, but
the shame I feel for that patty cake sequence, I'm just gonna
like,
wedge
what
myself.
was I thinking?
Yeah, I'm gonna just dig as far as I can dig and hide out for the entire Obama administration.
Yeah, but in all honesty, though, like, I mean, I guess it depends on what you want to get out of the game, and I think there's a lot of the game's more infamous parts you can skip over if you're not gonna fully complete it. So if you want to be like the most hardcore, I understand everything type of Rare or DK fan, then I feel like you should 101% it. It's not that bad to do. It's not going to take you like 100 hours of your life. I mean, maybe Beaver Bother, but if you use rewind and save states on Beaver Bother, whatever. You know, if you just want to experience what the game is like to play and get the basic gist of it and move on, it's just whatever you want to get out of it. And so, no, I'm not going to kill you for saying that you shouldn't 101% the game if you don't want to.
I would argue, though, that with save states, with rewind, it is much easier to accomplish the goal of getting everything in the game, seeing everything in the game. I do think, and maybe I'm being too much of a stick in the ass about this, but I do think that any Donkey Kong fan does owe it to themselves to experience everything in this game at least once in your life. And thankfully, this format does make that, as I said, much more digestible, much less of a daunting, sometimes horrendous dirge. It's one thing to be like, oh, I'm going to jump into Gloomy Galleon, chip away at it over the course of a week or two. It's another thing to have to look at your console hooked up to your television and being like, oh, I have to beat Gloomy Galleon. Fuck, I don't want to do that. And then you just don't play it for a few weeks and then it just drifts away and you forget about your playthrough of DK64. So it's more accommodating than it's ever been to see everything in this game. And yeah, there's lots of weird stuff in DK64, like in the audition scene, the critters lusting after Tiny and Candy and the mermaid. And it's like, that's another thing DK64 does, is it establishes that critters are horny for Kongs. K. Rool can be horny for Kongs. I wouldn't have necessarily gone in that direction, Rare. I don't know why.
Yeah. And on the note of fully completing it, I think just to beat the game, you already have to do quite a bit. And you have to do what, in my opinion, is the most difficult thing in the game, which is beating the DK arcade twice. Starting out with only one life each time. You can earn another life if you get enough points, but I think that's the most difficult thing in the game. So if you did that, you can do anything else. You can do all the mini games. You can bluff your way through Beaver Bother. You might as well just go all the way.
Beaver Bother doesn't bother me, actually. No,
I'm good at it. I get it on my like first or second or third try.
Once you figure out what you're supposed to do, it's not that bad. Honestly, like, the thing that was tripping me up, jumping back into DK64 post-Bonanza, were Donkey Kong's attacks, and just, like, trying to defeat Naughties. It was such a chore.
Yeah, basic movement in this game can just be really awkward a lot of the time. I hate this stupid, like, hand swat move that DK does. It's,
yeah.
it's just... I love his grunting and his rolling. It's just specifically like when he stands still and does his little, like, he slaps his hand around. It's just such a, like, pathetic looking attack. It's like, come on, DK, you can do better than that.
I am amazed I'm not trying to walk up walls, like climb up surfaces or anything. Like, I know I can't do that in this game, so I'm not trying to do that in this game. I thought Bonanza would really fuck me up in that regard. Weirdly, it's Sea of Thieves that I'm fucked up now, because I jump into Sea of Thieves and I try to climb everything because I don't know why. Maybe it's a modern game and I'm like, well, it should control like Donkey Kong Bananza does.
Mm-hmm.
But DK64 I know well enough not to even attempt.
Yeah.
TJ says you can hurt enemies in this game by jumping on them, but the default jump in this game is usually too low for you to ever want to do that. Yeah, that was an argument DK Vine made back in 1999. We were like, actually, you can jump on the naughties in this game, so it's just like Donkey Kong Country. Like, okay, all right, you idiots. No, it's not. It's so clunky. It's so, like, hit or miss whether you're even gonna land on them.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that the option's even there, but oh yeah.
Yeah, you can even jump on those fire guys that only show up when you're trying to save Rodney the hare. You can jump on them. That's a bold move, but you can do it.
Thank you for using his Christian name.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Grant Kirkhope just vamping in the studio, Traveler. Like, and that was Donkey Kong's default voice up until like 2004 or so.
Those were just the groans that were naturally coming out of Grant when he had to do like 3 phenomenal soundtracks in as many years.
Yeah.
Plus other stuff he was working on, so.
Yeah.
All right, let's take our 4th call.
Hi, Hyle. Hey, Courtney. This is Carson, a.k.a. Plastasm. Just wanted to call in about DK64 on NSO. Me and my friends have been very happy that it's finally on there. We've been kind of waiting to replay it until they put it up there. And it's been kind of interesting going back to it after Bonanza. I think playing Bonanza kind of helped me to appreciate Donkey Kong 64 more, at least what it was going for or attempting to do with the limited time and resources they had to put that game together. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say it feels maybe a bit less well considered and cooked than a lot of the other Nintendo 64 Rare games, simply because the original vision had to get scrapped and they restarted. But that's besides the point. What they ended up coming up with is huge collectathon with 5 characters with a bunch of different moves. I feel like Bonanza kind of takes some of its creative ideas and almost reverse engineers them to make them make more sense. Like, we all love the coconut guns and the shooting in DK64 as a meme, but honestly it feels kind of just like an excuse to add more shit to shoot at, to add switches to gate off parts of the stages, or to have little shooting mini games in a way that feels a bit strange. Like, well, Banjo-Kazooie had shooting, so we should have it too. But picking up and throwing stuff in Bonanza makes a ton of sense, because that's Donkey Kong. His main thing is that he's strong and he's got these big arms. So you've got all these different mechanics that take advantage of it and make sense and feel less arbitrary. The same thing with the multiple character mechanic. DK64 has 5 Kongs, but they all essentially play very similarly and don't really have that many unique moves and abilities to differentiate them. Whereas with Bonanza, the Bonanza transformations are all unique and add interesting movement utility and mechanics and interactions that just make it make sense, I guess. So And I feel like we can all kind of tell that this game was made by a bunch of DK64 freaks on some level, because I feel like they kept the core essential good bits in there. They just kind of had the time and resources and experience to make it into a much more palatable experience. Anyway, that's my take on it. I look forward to seeing you guys talk about the game. Y'all have a nice night.
Well, thank you for the call, Carson. Yeah, I think it's also worth considering that I know development times have ballooned compared to where they were in the 90s, but this version of Donkey Kong 64 came together in about a year and a half, whereas Bonanza was in development for, God, how long? Like, more than half a decade. So I would hope Bonanza is more well considered than DK64. And it is, but this was under a very tight deadline, and it was basically like banked in as Nintendo's big holiday game of 1999. So they had to get it done, and I don't envy that position. Like the amount of pressure and stress you would feel if you were on the DK64 team. And it's like no wonder they had to bring in so many other people from the other Rare teams to get this over the finish line, like Greg Mails and Chris Seaver. But yeah, I think, you know, knowing everything we know about DK64, it kind of makes sense why it is the way it is. But playing it as a kid, playing it as a teenager, I guess, I never would have known this was a compromised vision. And
yeah. I mean, ironically, it having such a short dev time is probably the reason that there is so much in it, because they didn't have time to go through that editing phase of paring it down and saying, like, these are the core ideas we should keep, and to make a more focused experience. Instead, it was kind of just like, we got this idea. Okay, make it. We have this other idea. All right, put that in. We just, we need to fill it out. So they didn't really have time to edit it down to something that might have been a little more tight.
Right. I mean, they did have to edit it slightly before release because they had to remove the stop and swap functionality, remove the Banjo-Kazooie refrigerator from Donkey Kong's treehouse, remove the Golden Kong relic from Creepy Castle.
Mm-hmm.
What could have been.
Yeah, that's one thing we know about DK64 now that we didn't last time we did an episode is what that relic was intended to do.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah. And just Andre says, didn't DK64 outsell both Banjo-Kazooie and Tui's initial releases on the N64? I believe it did. I definitely outsold Tui, but I believe it did outsell Banjo-Kazooie as well. Because at the end of the day, Donkey Kong has always been a strong brand. And rather than building something from scratch like they were doing with Banjo-Kazooie, like I know they introduced Banjo via Diddy Kong Racing, but like the Donkey Kong IP has always been a good seller, at least when it's not gated behind caveats like, oh, this is controlled with DK bongos, or this is for the Wii U, you know? Generally speaking, you release a Donkey Kong game, it will sell over 1 million copies pretty soon out of the gate. But yeah, Bonanza definitely has a lot of inspiration from Donkey Kong 64, which we are going to discuss after we read this comment from Blue Sky. So this is from Low Zombie yet again. It says, hey DK Vine, it's DK64 time. That almost rhymes. I'm pretty mixed on the legacy of this game. On the one hand, it was the final mainline DK game Rare ever made before the tragic buyout. And it's the first 3D DK game, and it brought us the glory of Chunky and Lanky. On the other hand, it seemingly turned the franchise into a joke, both in its perception of destroying the collectathon genre and the endless humiliation of the DK rap. Not that the rap is a bad thing, but it definitely seems like this rap gave the franchise the aura of the Stupid Monkey series, especially among game journalists and the general public. And need I have to repeat the damage Tiny Kong replacing Dixie Kong did to Dixie's importance in the franchise? Overall, it's definitely an important piece of DK history, but frankly, not all of that importance is for the best. I knew Low Zombie was going to bring up the Dixie omission. I knew that was coming. Yeah, like, I don't know if this game is what turned the perception of this franchise into the Stupid Monkey series among game journalists. I don't know if this is the game that did it, or if that perception was always going to eventually set in amongst the tastemakers of the aughts. I think just given where games were going and the perception of what Rare did in the 1990s with Nintendo, I think even without Donkey Kong 64, we might have always gotten there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say, but there was a general negative sentiment against anything that was even like remotely cartoony and had, animal characters and stuff like that in that era. So I think it would have happened even with something that seems as relatively like serious and atmospheric as like Donkey Kong Country or Donkey Kong Country 2 would have still had that negative light turned on it. I don't think Tiny did much damage to Dixie, actually. Like there was this one game, but then it's not like Tiny started showing up everywhere. It's not like Tiny was in returns, whereas Dixie wasn't. I mean, if Tiny did show up, it was because Dixie was also there, like in Super Sluggers and like DKRDS. So I don't think she did any damage to Dixie's lasting legacy or anything, just outside of this one game.
I would have loved Dixie to be in this game. I know, Courtney, you're a big fan of Tiny. I don't dislike Tiny. Like, I like all three of the new Kongs in this game. I am a huge Dixie fan as well, but I think that Dixie rebounded fairly quickly. Even under Rare, had Rare continued to develop the franchise, Dixie and Tiny were both going to share the spotlight in the Donkey Kong Racing, Diddy Kong Pilot era. I don't think Dixie would have been relegated to the sidelines for long, and then post-buyout, she almost immediately started showing up again. Donkey Konga 2, the Payon games, and yeah, whenever Tiny was brought back, they did the age up thing, but she was always paired with Dixie in those contexts, just as like a sisterly pair, which I love to see. We've never seen Chunky hang out with Kitty, but we definitely have gotten Dixie and Tiny as kind of a unit. And I always like that, yeah, they would be in that friend group with Diddy and like that clique, that collective of Kongs. It would make sense that they would hang out together. So yeah, like I think that it was a shame that Dixie and Kitty could not get in the 3D Donkey Kong game on the N64, but I also don't have any ill will towards Tiny and Chunky. In fact, I prefer Chunky over Kitty. I'm sorry. Don't hate me, Kitty fans. Don't hate me, but I think Chunky is just a better character because he's more defined than the baby.
Absolutely. And yeah, like Dixie probably just should have been in this game instead of them inventing a new character who's essentially her again. But I think it worked out just fine for her. She's obviously, these days, she's back in prominence and has a great future.
Yeah, she's indisputably the third most important Kong character. In fact, she's basically billed as Diddy's co-equal. I mean, I love the way Bonanza just presented them as a duo. And then, of course, Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. Just, here's Dixie, finally.
Yep.
Here's Dixie in Returns. We don't care if it doesn't really work. It's going to be awesome, and it is. So, yeah, like, I understand the resentment that a hardcore Dixie fan, like, I'm somebody who loves Dixie Kong, but I'm never a person to really, like, weigh my love of the series as contingent upon a certain character. And so Like, it's never a deal breaker for me if K. Rool sits this one out, or Dixie sits this one out, or even Diddy sits this one out. Now, ask me again at different points in time, and I might say differently. Like, back in the mid-aughts, Diddy not being in Jungle Beat, that was a big deal. And K. Rool not being in Returns was kind of a big deal. But at this point, it's just like, nothing can really shake me from this series, and I'm going to view each entry on its own merits, regardless of which characters are actually in it or not. But I do get it if you're just really, really into one of the characters and then not having them even show up in this big game feels kind of weird. It does feel like a slight.
It would be like if Captain K. Rool really was K. Rool's brother.
All right, well, let's talk about Donkey Kong 64 in a post-Donkey Kong Bonanza world. And first of all, let's really quickly recap for the newbies the references to DK64 in Bonanza. Because Bonanza, I think you'll agree, it helped rehabilitate Donkey Kong 64's legacy before it was even on NSO. And I think it also took a bit of pressure, historical pressure, off of Donkey Kong 64, because Donkey Kong 64 was now no longer this load-bearing 3D platformer, the only 3D platformer entry in the Donkey Kong series. Now it doesn't have to shoulder all of that, and we can kind of just judge it by a slightly different metric. And so, yeah, like, it's interesting because Bonanza, very, very quickly, we learned, even in the announced trailer for Bonanza, that it would, at the very least, be referencing DK64 by using the Oh Banana sound clip whenever you collect a Banandium gem.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of surprising. I mean, obviously, it's a different audio clip. It's not the original "Oh Banana" that is just burned into our brains. But I like that they bothered to do that. I like that they actually went out of their way to put that little tribute in.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the references to DK64 in Bonanza that are earlier on in the game, and I got so used to hearing that throughout playing it that I just honestly completely forgot. And when the game was announced, that was a huge deal to me, but I guess it kind of got buried by other speculation and other details that people were noticing. But yeah, that was a very cool and comforting thing to hear right off the bat.
It was the naughty fossil that immediately pushed it out of my brain. And then from there it was, oh, Cranky's in the game. Oh, Ramby's in the game. Oh, the Northern Hemisphere is on the maps of the game, in the game.
Exactly.
And, yeah. And
they're putting the Northern Hemisphere back on the map.
And then from there, it was kind of just an escalation of, all right, where is he? Where's K. Rool?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Ramby music from DK64 gets a remix in this.
Yeah, it's so cool because this music to me, if you had told me that they called up Grant Kirkhope and told him to make a remix for the game, I would have believed it. It really sounds to me like his modern work. So I think they did a great job of adapting it. And I know Andre before told me that he didn't think it fit in with the rest of the game's soundtrack, but it's played in the very specific context of the race, so I think it works.
Yeah, and, up until this point in time, we had gotten the DK Isles remix in Donkey Kong Adventure, Mario Plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, but that was also a game composed by Grant Kirkhope. So I thought, like, the little references to DK64 in there, it just felt like, oh, it's because Kirkhope. Even the Hellavines that were there, it was kind of just like, yeah, that's really cool, but would that be in there if the composer of DK64 wasn't composing this Donkey Kong DLC? And then to get this like full on remix, it was just like, yeah, well, that makes sense because this is a 3D Donkey Kong game and Rambi was in a previous 3D Donkey Kong game. I'm glad they're doing a new version of this song. And yeah, so it's like you can kind of explain away even up until that point, like knowing about the Rambi music. We first heard it in Nintendo Today. And so that was just pretty clear. We already knew Rambi was probably showing up in the game because his head icon appeared in Cranky's dialogue in what we saw in Lagoon Lair in the early footage. So it was just like, okay, well, yeah, things are kind of starting to add up. But then playing Bonanza and then talking to Quiztone in Resort Lair, this really kind of bowled me over when I first saw it. It's when Quiztone starts talking about coconuts and says, "Do you miss those sparkling coconuts from days gone by? At least the oranges don't explode this time. Ha ha."
Yeah, that's why they're wearing a bowler hat, because they're always bowling you over.
But that is like just a direct reference, not only to Donkey Kong 64, but it's like an actual like statement of fact that Donkey Kong 64 is this adventure that has happened in the past of this game. And we're going to reference crystal coconuts and the orange grenades. And that up until this point, like Bonanza was like acknowledging the history, but this is really where the game started to feel like, okay, they're actually going for it. Like, I think once we hit Racing Layer, like all bets are off. But up until this point, it's like a slow, steady drip of references and homages. And like they don't want to scare away the newbies too much. And so to get this like line from Quiztoad, I'm like, oh my god, I never thought we would see something like that in a Donkey Kong game ever again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, the sparkling coconuts was a reference to the DKC TV show. Actually,
oh sure,
I'm just kidding.
Sure it was, yeah. No, we know Quiztone models their fashion after Swanky, not Bluster.
True. Can you imagine if they did though model themselves? I mean, that would be kind of hard because Fractones don't have arms, and Bluster only wears like cuffs. That's like the only thing he wears. So.
I mean, a Fractone can grow out little appendages.
That's true.
Collectone does, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a reference to Armadillo, the boss army in Donkey Kong 64. In the description for the army or armadillo fossil in Radiance Layer. Do you want to read this, Courtney?
Yeah. It says, these critters rolled into balls to critters with a C. These critters rolled into balls to defend their turf. Some of them with military training simply carried cannons instead.
Yeah. Again,
we love our boy Armadillo.
Yeah, it's surprising that they bothered to reference the boss variant in Donkey Kong 64, especially because even though the regular armies were planned for the game at one time, they didn't make it into the final version. And so they made the connection there that, yeah, Armadillo is an army. Is one of the same armadillos from Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Land, and Conker's Pocket Tales, of course.
Okay, I had a question. I have a tangential question for you that I brought up on my stream the other day. And, okay, so Armadillo is an armadillo, obviously. He's a big army. But he has been mechanically supplemented, cyborg-like, with a mechanical shell with guns and everything.
Right.
But when he loses that shell and you see him all naked, he's just like a pathetic, naked being. And, you know, armadillos' shells are part of their body. It's like turtles. It's not like they can just leave their shells. It's part of them. So why do you think he looks like that? Do you think he was born that way and had to be supplemented? Do you think he was just genetically modified to have this, to like pair with this mechanical supplementation? What do you think about that? I never thought about that until just like 2 days ago.
I think he was genetically modified. We know K. Rool likes getting into robotics and cybernetics, and I think it was basically like, oh, this unnaturally large army let's just stick a metal shell on it and outfit it with cannons. And like, I don't think Armadillo was born that way, a la Lady Gaga. I think he was created in a lab in the interim between Donkey Kong Land 3 and Donkey Kong 64.
He's a Baron K. Rulenstein experiment, but now I'm just getting this vision of Armadillo being grown in like a clone vat, like Mewtwo or something. Just this shellless giant army whose point is to be outfitted with a mechanical shell instead.
I mean, who knows what's going on in Frantic Factory? Who knows what is going on in K. Rool's little flesh factory, where he's got all sorts of genetic mutations and monsters being created.
Yeah, he does look more like an aardvark.
Yeah, I mean, all the designs in DK64 kind of tend a little bit weirder and more abstract than our traditional country counterparts. Look at Claptraps. But then, yeah, once you get to the K. Rool reveal, spoilers, and...
Gasp!
I'm
screaming all over again.
Clasp is a Kremling. Once you get there, then they really start going hard into the Donkey Kong 64 references.
You know, the moment that K. Rool gets up and he uppercuts Void Kong out of the plot of the game, when it pans up at him, it goes into Crocodile Cacophony eventually, and I believe you told me that you didn't notice the initial part of the song that was playing, but it does not start out with Crocodile Cacophony. The first glimpses you get of K. Rool in this game, it is his blaring chords that are his DK64 theme, and that just sent shivers up and down my spine. Like, I couldn't believe it was that of all things, because... You know, I think after Smash, Gangplank Galleon has been pretty firmly established as, like, the K. Rool song, and then obviously Crocodile Cacophony is also up there. And then, you know, but these specific, like, DK64, really, it's very simple. It's just like a series of chords, but I love that for him because it can be so easily integrated into other musical pieces, like the final battle in DK64, or like the New Donk City climb in this game, Bonanza. So, yeah, just hearing that was electric.
There is a lot of just soundtrack blending in this game. Like we talked about it for like 8 hours, about how this game kind of feels like it could serve as the grand finale to Donkey Kong. Just Donkey Kong. Like this could be the last game and it would feel satisfying because it pulls so many of those threads and weaves it all into this just amazing tapestry. But I think, yeah, the soundtrack and the way they incorporate so much of the past music, even just whiffs of it, even if it's not like we're going full on remix mode, we just want a note here or there that evokes this David Wise or Grant Kirkhope song. You know, it works. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that song, if you want to call it that, but his DK64 theme is so great because it's just so intense and it really gets across how intimidating and threatening he is in this game, and the looming presence of the island and the Blastomatic and everything. And of course it playing during the game over scene if you choose to view it, but it's just like dun 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 dun, and it's like, yeah, that's the sound of doom. That's the sound of a giant laser being pointed at your island.
That's the sound of his toes wiggling in his boxing shoes.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it. And of course then the whole New Donk City sequence culminates with you reaching, or rather you seeing the boxing ring rise up from the Banandium mush. And when I saw the boxing ring, I was like, oh my god, like, I can't believe that they are ending this in another boxing ring.
Yeah, K. Rool's the king.
Yeah. Like, it was one thing to reference the fake out credits, but that we actually then just go right back to it. And it does, like, speak to K. Rool's character, too, that he just like wants a do-over. He's just like, I can't get past that defeat back in 1999. Can we just do this again so I can win? He just can't let it go. And so he has to recreate the conditions.
Yeah, right down to the lights, which unfortunately you cannot knock down on his head, and I definitely tried.
No, it's more like a UFC lighting rig, like at the White House the other week. So we also, of course, got lots of references in the signage in NBC. We got the tiny bank.
Yes, great choice.
Which there was some debate recently on social media if that was a deliberate reference to the German Donkey Kong 64 website, which said that Tiny was a tax official.
Yeah, at this point, I'm just choosing to believe that it was intentional.
Well, you brought up a great point about that, where you said that it might not be that surprising that they would allude to it, given that it does seem like amongst the Bonanza team, there are genuine Donkey Kong sickos on that team. And they would probably know about this through the fan culture if they themselves are part of it. So even if they weren't like personally aware of the German Donkey Kong 64 website, it would have reached them, somebody eventually, and they would have sneaked that in.
Right. There's so many random things that just were invented out of the blue. Recently in the Kremling chronology, I was looking at those collectible cards they had in the back of Nintendo Power for Donkey Kong Country 2. And they just invented random stuff like the favorite movies of all these characters, like Diddy's favorite movie is Curious George Rides a Bicycle, stuff like that. And nobody remembers all of those little details, but the thing about Tiny being a tax official is one that has really lived on. Like, out of all of that kind of garbage, that's one that has had a life because it's just so ridiculous and it gets passed around among the fandom. So, yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable at all to think that the devs would know about that. It's not like they literally had to use the, Wayback Machine to look at the German DK64 website to know that. It's had a life of its own.
Yeah. There's the Lanky ad in NDC as well, where we actually see a representation of Lanky's face.
Yes, and our debate on what kind of show that was, if it was a musical or if it was just a one-man comedy show.
Yeah, Lanky's stand-up act is coming soon to Netflix. And there are no references to Chunky in New Donk City. Unfortunately, like for a while there, Chunky was not referenced in Donkey Kong Bananza, which felt odd because he was in the Super Mario Brothers movie. So, it's like, oh, but no room for Chunky here. Okay. I didn't mind, spread the love. It's nice that Tiny and Lanky got a little nod. But then came the DLC. Then came the huge-ass Donkey Kong 64 homage with the DK Island world in Bonanza.
Yeah, and the music.
Yes.
Once again, we get to hear a new version of the Donkey Kong 64 DK Isles theme. And it is not only a remix of it, but it's a dynamic remix where depending on what part of the island you're exploring, the music changes a bit, and it's very lovely.
Yeah, I love just all the little noises and sounds depending on where you're standing, and I swear sometimes you can almost hear a ship out at sea or something. I don't know what I'm supposed to be hearing, but there's just all these little ambient noises that are mixed in, and then you go in the cave and it's muffled, and I love it. I love it so. I love the entirety of DK Island in Bonanza, and yeah, it's mostly a reference to Donkey Kong 64 in that it's recreating the overworld, albeit the Banana Fairy Island isn't, at the very least, explicitly displayed, but you've got like lots of little touches, and they do tie it in with the rest of the Donkey Kong series. Like there are Donkey Kong Country trilogy references and locations, and even retro references, and it just really ties everything together in a way that past Donkey Kong games have never been able to do. And then, of course, came the Emerald Rush events, and we got the So Strong It's Funny event as the second one in the series, which was themed around Donkey Kong 64 and Hilltop Lair, and it brought us the Chunky Kong statue and the Lanky Kong statue as rewards.
Yeah, the Chunky statue is still my favorite out of all of the Emerald Rush event statues, because they literally picked the exact pose I would have gone with to represent Chunky Kong as a character, which is his idle animation where all the butterflies land on him. That has always been like his defining moment for me. He's basically like a Disney princess. He's just that pure of heart that the butterflies flock to him, you know? It's so cute. And when I saw that, I described it as getting like a gut punch, but in a positive way. Like, you know, I couldn't believe that's what they went with. And I didn't expect to get a reveal that would make me that happy after actually beating the game, but yet Bonanza kept on delivering.
Bonanza's still delivering. As a huge Donkey Kong Country 3 apologist, we're getting an Ellie the Elephant statue in July.
Oh yeah, I'm so happy about all the animal buddies. Radley looks great. They all look great. Yeah. But the Chunky is still my absolute favorite statue.
And of course, Chunky, this is the first time we've seen him with the slight redesign Kong nose.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, Lanky, we can't tell because he's got that stupid clown nose on his face still. But, yeah, with Chunky, it's like, oh, yeah, this is the first Lanky redesign since 1999. But Chunky sat out the entirety of the buyout era. Like, Chunky only appeared in Donkey Kong Country 3 GBA as a small little character in the water. In the one funky mini game. And so, like, to get Chunky back in a new design, that's wild. Even if it's just a statue representation of him, it's still a big deal.
For sure.
Yeah. And then, of course, we did get Tiny Kong and Ghost Wrinkly later, but they weren't themed after Donkey Kong 64. They were themed, I guess, the cycles of life. It was ostensibly their pay-on designs, Teenage Tiny and Dead Wrinkly.
Mm-hmm.
And Wrinkly's in her, like, pay-on night cap or whatever she's wearing. Shower cap. I don't know, whatever she died in. She slipped in the shower and broke her neck.
Oh, no. Yeah, like, they did a clever thing, I think, with the positioning, the default positioning of the 3 DK64 Kongs, where it is tall, tiny, but she's placed behind the others, so if you look at them all, she looks to be smaller because she's further in the background, so I'm sure they did that on purpose.
I did appreciate that, yeah. And it's nice because as somebody who loves continuity and never once takes backsies on continuity, I'm like, yeah, keep her that size, but we can acknowledge her original appearance as well, especially in approximation with the other two DK64 Kongs. So I like that they're all together. And it's really cool because then you can bring the Dixie statue over and the Diddy statue over. Like you can pair them up. You can bring Donkey and Diddy over and have the DK64 Kongs reunited, or you can have, Dixie hanging out with Chunky really for the first time. And it's fun. It's fun. I love playing with my statues in Bonanza.
Yeah. A lot of people assume that I want them to retcon Tiny back into small Tiny because I've spoken about before, as a very short person myself, I always related to Tiny as a kid. But no, I agree with you. Like, what's done is done. I don't want them to retcon her because I feel like that would be a really bad precedent for other things in the series. So I don't like modern Tiny as much as old school Tiny, but I want her to stay as she is, for sure.
Yeah. So they're discussing in a live stream chat that the butterflies on Chunky's statue are not actually connected to anything. They're just mysteriously levitating And yeah, that is a weird little decision because they've put poles on most of the bits on the rest of the statues, like Tiki Tong's hands. So it's like, how are those butterflies just existing?
Those are just real butterflies that are hovering perfectly still around the statues at all time.
Just Audrey says the statue material is actually a thin coating over the butterflies, having been sculpted out of the neighboring Willowwood's anti-gravity chocolate. I was thinking something along the terms of like, well, whatever material these statues are made of, they seem to have been carved by the ancient Kong society. There's some sort of magic at work here. Maybe it's some early Banerjee harnessing. Maybe it's something else. I don't know.
So you think these are prophetic statues?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because I don't want to get into it all right now because we're eventually going to do the Emerald Rush wrap-up episode once the final event happens. But basically, we're learning that Squawks, the other statues, the just base statues in the DLC, Squawks is retrieving them from the ocean floor. And they're all marked with these ancient Kong, like, banana Ouroboros symbols that are around all the temples in Bonanza on DK Island. So yeah, I think they're all prophetic, and Void has gotten some of them and he's hoarding them for Emerald Rush rewards. But yeah, I think these are all just like visions of the future to come from the ancient Kong society.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also an idiot, so, take everything I say at face value. Let's quickly compare the two 3D platformers, Courtney. So, I mean, to be fair to DK64, Bonanza is one of the best games I've ever played, and Donkey Kong 64 is a game I've also played. And I have a lot of nostalgia and affection for DK64. And I just didn't expect that Donkey Kong Bananza would be as good as it was. I'll say this. I went into Donkey Kong 64 expecting it to be my favorite game ever in 1999. And I went into Bonanza not knowing what to expect. And it just wound up almost being my favorite game of all time. Very, very nearly touching DKC2. Although I don't think DKC2 will ever be dethroned, honestly.
Yeah, and as you know, I'm in the exact same position. Bonanza did become my second favorite game ever, and Donkey Kong Country 2 is my favorite. But, I hold this position of being the DK64 lover in the community, but it's a complicated thing because I have to admit that, I want people to play the game. I want people to give it a fair chance. I want people to not just take other people's word for it that it's bad or whatever. But I recognize it has a lot of flaws and not everyone is going to enjoy it. And some people are going to just try a few levels of it and decide they completely hate it. And that's okay. I think Bonanza is an actually indisputably good game. It's a much better designed game. And not only that, but it is better as a Donkey Kong game. It's not just Banjo-Kazooie with Kong slapped on. It's built from the ground up as like, all right, we have this character who's a big, strong gorilla. Like, what can he do? He can climb. He can use his strength in all of these ways. And it's designed as what a Donkey Kong 3D platformer should really be. And I think we're really, truly getting that for the very first time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But, I said this on our episodes, I believe, but it's nice that they showed DK64 so much respect and they didn't say like, well, everybody knows that game was kind of trash, so we're not going to mention it. We're just going to show how much better we can do as the internally developed Nintendo Donkey Kong game. But no, they gave it so much love and kind of, even if the influence isn't always completely obvious, I think it's implicit that DK64 did have a big impact and influence on the developers of this game, whether they grew up with it or whether they just played it at some point down the line to get inspiration. Even things like the Bonanza transformations are, I believe one of the callers pointed out, kind of a better implementation of the idea of swapping characters. And it, in fact, works a lot like the mods people have made for DK64. It's called Tag Anywhere, where you just use the D-pad, and the randomizer incorporates this as well. You can just swap between whatever Kongs you have with the click of a button. And you can do that in Bonanza with the Bonanza forms. And, so it is taking these ideas and making them better, but it is built with a lot of love for everything that came before, and that includes DK64. And, that's all I can ask for is respecting it as an integral part of the legacy of the series.
And I think that's what Bonanza does so well in respect to the past and Donkey Kong games that have come before. It doesn't try to cast anything into oblivion. It kind of embraces everything, as messy as some of it might have been. Like we've talked before, I don't think there's a bad Donkey Kong game. I think there's Donkey Kong games that are lesser, but I think the DK series, especially when compared to something like Sonic 06, has never really had an outright atrocious entry. The closest might be Barrel Blast / Jet Race. And even then you see the vision there. Like you understand what it could have been had they just been allowed to use the DK bongos as intended. Yeah.
And, I feel like I had something else to say, but I can't remember what it is.
But yeah, like Bonanza, we've talked before about how Bonanza recontextualized aspects of DKC2 and DKC3 and sort of like elevated them even more in our esteem because of how it's all connected in the series and the ongoing story and narratives and lore, and just it like really did make you want to go back and play past Donkey Kong games all over again. And, while Bonanza might not do that as much with Donkey Kong 64 from a narrative perspective, I think Bonanza existing does and did make me want to go back into DK64 because of that reverence and respect it has for it. And it's just so refreshing to not have Nintendo talking down their own history anymore. Like this year alone, we get DK64 back on NSO. We get Virtual Boy on NSO. And I just love that they can give a warm embrace to their history without wanting to shy away from things that were either failures or retroactively viewed as such.
Yeah, and there's a lot of openness, I would say, in, people on the internet or just general fans of Nintendo or fans of gaming these days. I find are pretty eager to go back to old games and try them for the first time. Maybe it's just because new games are so goddamn expensive all the time, but people, if they have the N64 expansion pack, especially since things don't get added very often, there's pretty wide audience that will actually try this stuff out for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember what I was going to say, and it's that we were talking on our last DK64 episode for the 25th anniversary on what a new 3D platformer could be like before we knew about Bonanza, and which we would know about in like 5 months. And one of the things we discussed was maybe you could use these different Kongs that you swap between, and they would each have their different powers, and you could solve problems in a more freeform way. There would be lots of different ways to approach a certain situation. And that's kind of exactly what happened, except instead of swapping Kongs, it was swapping roided up DK transformation forms that we could never have possibly guessed or seen that coming. But yeah, we were kind of on the right track.
Sure. Yeah. I do think eventually we'll get more of the character swapping notions in a future Donkey Kong game, maybe a 2D platformer.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the way to go. But Donkey Kong 64, despite the critical drubbing it took in the aughts, in the buyout era, and despite the kind of the smug attitude a lot of people had towards it, it's been remarkably durable in fan culture. Not just Donkey Kong fan culture, but it's made new fans along the way, and that's something we talked about on the 25th. But why can't people stop loving DK64?
Yeah, my own personal reasons, and I think this is true for a lot of people that called into the last episode, in particular, the last DK64 episode, is we grew up with it. We were little when we first played it, and so it had that impression on us. And obviously, over time, the proportion of people for which that is true is going to decrease, unless for some reason parents right now are raising their kids and saying, I'm going to give you the Nintendo Online expansion pack library, and that's the only thing that you have access to. But, so it's that particular reason is becoming a smaller proportion of the people out there who love DK64. But, a lot of people are getting into it for the randomizer. What's interesting is my husband had never played the game until a couple of years ago, despite obviously watching me play it every year. He had maybe played around with it a little bit, but he had never actually finished it or got very far. So he played all the way through it a couple years ago, and then he started doing the randomizer himself. And now he knows as much about DK64, at least, maybe not in a lore and character sense, but about the way the game actually plays and works and what it contains. He knows as much as I do, and we compete against each other in randomizer races, and he wins because he is better at the logic than I am. And this past week, I actually beat him for the first time, and I was very excited about it. So you got new people getting into the game and respecting it all the time. I have a friend who just played it for the first time this past year and enjoyed it quite a bit. He had complaints with it, but he still liked it overall. So, I think especially with like streaming culture and the accessibility of playing old games, you usually don't have to pay very much to get access to them. It's an easy thing to just pick up and say, I'm going to try this for the first time. That's going to continue to gain fans, even in the modern day. And as for what makes it memorable to people, I think there's something accessible about the game because, like we talked about, the Donkey Kong brand is just very strong. It always has been, even in those eras where we didn't get many games coming out, like Donkey Kong himself is just a lovable, popular character, and people will jump into a game starring Donkey Kong. There's just this innate appeal, I think. To appeal was not meant to be a pun, banana pun, but
it works.
There's this appeal to, I don't know, just playing a game. And we talked to, Low Zombie complained and lamented about the Silly Monkey series, but I think people like that it's the Silly Monkey series. There's something that's obviously not all it is, and that's not all it should be, but there is an appeal to just like these characters are goofy and charming, and you can just kind of drop into their world and feel like you're hanging out with this funny bunch of apes that you love. And there's something that, even something like Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie, which we love deeply, I think there's a little bit more of an hurdle to get invested in that world. Whereas people probably already know Donkey Kong or some of these other characters from other games, and it just makes it a little easier to say, yeah, I'm going to check this out. And I already kind of get the gist of what kind of tone this game is going to have or what it's going to be about.
I mean, if you're having trouble getting into Banjo, just know that Banjo is Diddy Kong's friend and go from there.
Don't forget. But, again, there's this kind of, the DK rap obviously, should it have ever existed? Did it damage the brand back in the day by being completely goofy and ridiculous? Well, the point is that it does exist and we can't do anything about it. And I think it is what it is. Over the years, I think it's become far more beloved than it has become hated.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be people out there who still think everything is cringe or whatever. But to a large degree, I think it's like the TV show. Like, people just kind of embrace its corniness, and you can make a lot of memes and jokes out of it. And it's good to just have something this silly and quotable that's associated with the franchise and with this game in particular. It was in the frickin' Mario movie, for crying out loud, and Grant Kirkhope was not credited, unfortunately, but it was in the movie. And that's why the original Mario movie is better than the Galaxy movie, because it has the DK rap in it.
It also has Swanky Kong.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
It has Kongs in general.
I think there's something about like cheese, and there's like a fine line where something is cheesy, where it's endearing because it just goes all in on it, and then there's the cheesy that feels manufactured. And look, I really like ukulele, and I think honestly I prefer playing ukulele over Donkey Kong 64. That doesn't mean I like the characters more. It just means like I think as just gameplay wise, I prefer that in replay. Like, but the ukulele rap is a poor, contrived imitation of the DK rap. It just doesn't get the job done.
The DK rap is lightning in a bottle. You can't do it again.
Just
you can't imitate it.
All of the weird little decisions that they made for it, like pineapple smells. Like what are we doing? What is this? And who would think this was cool in 1999? In any year, really. It felt like an early 90s artifact, really, but that's also kind of why it works. There's this timeless, what the hell is this quality to it that I think holds up.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was like, what the heck then? And it's just as much what the heck now. It was silly then. It's just as much silly now. Like it doesn't matter that these are, what is viewed by modern standards, primitive N64 renditions of these characters. If anything, that adds more charm to it.
At least the DK rap doesn't start off with Donkey Kong saying, "Hey, I'm Donkey Kong and I'm here to say."
Yeah, it could have been worse. Also, they say hell in it.
They say hell, which I know in the UK is not considered a curse word, but it soiled the britches of many the puritanical United States citizen back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and to hit some other points on why DK64 remains beloved, we have talked about how it lacks some amount of character compared to something like Banjo-Kazooie or Tooie or even Conker, where these NPCs that are in the game are so random and they don't really have any personality to speak of, and they don't even have names. They're just kind of there to race you or do some mini game with you. But if you look past that, like, we've taken so much of Rare's formula for granted and what they did, especially in the N64 era. But compared to so many games of its time, DK64 just is bursting with personality still. Like the idle animations, the attention to detail, the text, if you actually read what like Cranky and Funky are saying to you, or even Wrinkly, or, any of it. There's humor, and yes, a lot of it is very immature humor. There's a whole lot of burping in this game, but there's also humor, which is a little more clever than that. And so I think especially if maybe going back to this era, it stands out even more. And especially if you maybe haven't played the Banjo-Kazooie games, and so you're not as used to this sort of thing. Like they really had such a style for making platformers and making the characters seem charming and full of personality and alive. And even if that doesn't extend to all the NPCs in this, it's certainly true of the Kongs. It's true of K. Rool and the bosses. So, and even just the basic enemies, I think the randomizer made me appreciate this a lot more, because they put the enemies, they get shuffled. So you'll see random enemies where they're not supposed to be all over the place. And for some reason that made me pay a lot more attention to just the walk cycles of the enemies, the way they just kind of look around. They all have their own idle animations too. The swagger that the Kasplats have when they walk, and how they just pound their fists into their palm, pumping themselves up. There's just so much of that. Pretty much every character in the game has some cute little details going on.
I think Donkey Kong 64's biggest hindrance is that its harshest critics to this day are Rare fans. And that's because we're not comparing it to all of video games or as a product unto itself. We're comparing it to Banjo-Kazooie. We're comparing it to Banjo-Tooie. We're comparing it to the original Donkey Kong Country trilogy and kind of the tone and presentation in those. And maybe that's not fair given how many just banger titles Rare was releasing in the 90s and early aughts, you know? It's almost like we're so hard on this game because it doesn't live up to that threshold. It doesn't reach that benchmark that so many of its contemporaries from that studio were doing.
Right. It doesn't meet our very high standards for what Rare was already doing, but to a lot of people, you know, without necessarily that same framework, I mean, it is a standout N64 game for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. I recently defended Donkey Kong Land on the Kongversation. Dustin and I were talking about DK Challenge, and we talked about the Donkey Kong Land Challenge construction site fight. And I was like, look, because Dustin had only recently played the Donkey Kong Land games. And I said, I understand Donkey Kong Land. It's not a great game. I really understand because wonky controls, it's hard to see the characters depending on what you're playing. Instant death when the screen doesn't catch up with you when you fall. It's got a lot holding it back. It's the Battletoads GB engine jerry-rigged to be a Donkey Kong game. It shouldn't work at all right? But as the second game of this modern Donkey Kong series following Donkey Kong Country, it's so important to me, and I will always defend it on those merits. And then I was thinking about Donkey Kong 64, because we were just immediately going into this episode, and I was like, wait a second. Hypocrite much? Because, you know, Donkey Kong 64, to me, it was the 7th or 8th game of the modern Donkey Kong series, if you got on board with Donkey Kong Country. Depending on how you count Diddy Kong Racing, it's the 8th. It's the 7th if you're just going just mainline Donkey Kong. In terms of appearances of the modern Donkey Kong, like where the actual character shows up, it's his 11th appearance, I believe. And in terms of overall DKU games, you know, counting the Banjo Conquer cameo game collective, it's the 15th. So my disappointment with it, as much as I tried to take it, to like talk myself out of it at the time by writing a glowing review on DK Vine in 1999, upon just going after sites like IGN who didn't give it a perfect 10 out of 10. As much as I tried to like build it up in my mind that it was the greatest game of all time, just like Star Wars fans were doing with the Phantom Menace that year, I eventually didn't keep holding it in that same rarefied air, pun intended, as Donkey Kong Land. And that's because at the end of the day, once that disappointment kind of wore off for me, it just didn't mean as much to me as Donkey Kong Land did, coming at a very formative time in my Donkey Kong fandom. And I mean, DK64 eventually did feel like a letdown to me once I stopped trying to hype it up in my brain, because I'd waited nearly 5 years for it. I had never waited for a video game at that time as long as I'd waited for Donkey Kong 64. And I was building it up in my head even before it was announced. Like, what is this going to be? You know, DK64 did deviate from the gameplay and feel of Donkey Kong Country. It did make some questionable creative decisions, like the aforementioned sidelining of Dixie Kong. And, you know, Rare had just given us a brilliant 3D platformer with Banjo-Kazooie. So if you played that, this would feel like a bit of a come down in, you know, at the end of the day. And that's just my perspective, I realize. Like, that is my own lived experience and my journey leading to Donkey Kong 64. that eventually made me feel that way. Plus the embarrassment of being like such a obnoxious online defender of the game, which didn't really look good once we went into the buyout era, into the 2010s, and people were rediscovering DK Vine and they found this. And I'm like, yeah, I was a dumb teenager at the time. Give me a break. So I felt like I had to like just go extra hard against the game to like make up for that. Like there was some sort of intellectual dishonesty in having much positive to say about the game at all. But, you know, replaying this on the Switch too, post Bonanza, I realized yet again, because I often need these reminders, that Donkey Kong 64 is for a large number of Donkey Kong fans, especially those a bit younger than me, and got into the series with this game. This is their Donkey Kong game. Like, this is as important to them as a Donkey Kong Land or even a Donkey Kong Country game. And all of those criticisms, all of those faults, it doesn't hold up to Banjo-Kazooie. It doesn't do Donkey Kong like Donkey Kong Country. It doesn't mean anything to those fans, because why would it? They don't have that lived experience. This game is fun. This game is unique. It's full of personality and atmosphere, and it like holds up what it's trying to do. It holds up unto itself without those direct comparisons. And yeah, I was playing it in handheld mode last night, just in preparation for this episode, and I just running through those hallways in the worlds with the swinging lanterns and just the multicolored lights, and like I was looking at the texturing and, you know, from the jungles in Jungle Japes, the stonework in Angry Aztec, even Gloomy Galleon, which we all agree, not a great world, but it's such an atmospheric world that I can't help but just sit back and be like, wow, this does feel like a 3D Donkey Kong game as I would have imagined it in 1995 in this little bit. So, you know, I was just reminded with how I did feel in November 1999, or even in the 11th month hype cycle before that, looking at screenshots, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And I was reminded that I can be nostalgic for this game. I do have nostalgia for this era of video games and Rare and Donkey Kong. I mean, this is from the earliest days of DK Vine, so how could I not find a little nostalgia in this?
Yeah, something I was thinking of in my most recent revisit over the past couple weeks is this game gets a reputation as only bringing back elements from the first Donkey Kong Country, you know, except for like a few pictures of Captain K. Rool and clobbers and kabooms, and that's pretty much it. But that's really only true if you're looking at specifics and looking at the characters. But if you step back and look at the wider picture, I think aesthetically it flows on surprisingly well. And all of the level archetypes sort of harken back to stuff we'd seen in the previous games, except for maybe Fungi Forest, because that was originally a Banjo-Kazooie level.
Right.
But, you know, like, even then, like, it has mills, and Donkey Kong Country 3 has mills. I don't like the mills section of Fungi Forest, but I kind of respect it because it reminds me of DKC3. You know, it's got shiny crystal caves, which was a hallmark of the series. It's got a castle that was in DKC2. It's got a factory. It's got ancient ruins. It's obviously got a jungle. So, you know, everything fits in with stuff we had seen before.
Yeah. I think, too, and this is where it really helps having Bonanza at our backs. You know, when I was really getting into Donkey Kong Country, especially in 95, after I finally beat the first game, and then I got Donkey Kong Land, and I learned that, oh, Donkey Kong Country 2 is coming out later that year. And what? Diddy's the star? And there's a new girl Kong character who he's going to be partner up with? What is this? And I was just getting all jazzed about Donkey Kong as like, this is going to be my series. Like, I'm going to go all in on this. I'm going to stick with this for a while at least. And I started daydreaming and speculating about what Nintendo's upcoming 3D console, then known as the Nintendo Ultra 64, what it would do for Donkey Kong, what Rare would do for Donkey Kong on that console. And I really just imagined getting to run around Donkey Kong Island as a 3D space, you know, and I wanted to feel like I was actually traipsing around the Congo jungle as Donkey Kong or Diddy Kong or Dixie Kong would. And that was just a very potent thought that was always humming in the background throughout the rest of the Country and Land trilogies into the earliest days of the N64. And then you saw how Mario did it, and you kind of got a taste of it, maybe a little bit with Diddy Kong Racing, but you really just wanted to see that Donkey Kong game. And it didn't really happen with Donkey Kong 64 for me. You know, Donkey Kong Island, the overworld, pretty barren as far as vegetation goes. There's a few palm trees, but it's not the lush, verdant, tropical paradise that we thought it would be. And what I was imagining was a game several generations beyond what was possible on the Nintendo 64. Like, I was imagining open world Breath of the Wild style Donkey Kong in 1995, right? Like, my childhood imagination got the best of me. But with Donkey Kong Bananza's DLC, I finally kind of got a little bit of that daydream fulfilled. I mean, it's still not the open world Donkey Kong Island game that I would love, but it's kind of a micro version of that. It's a little appetizer. It's this version of DK Island that is actually verdant. It's full of wildlife, including even quacks flying up above. You've got like remnants of past games and reminders of the full history of the franchise all around it. You can just endlessly explore and just live in that space. You can just listen to music and hang out. It's so much of what I wanted with DK64. And so that really just takes the weight off of DK64 for me.
Yeah.
That irritated resentment that had slowly built up after the game's release and after we beat it and after we moved on to Banjo-Tooie and we entered the buyout years and the narratives from outside, even though you try to ignore it and you try to argue against it, you do absorb a little bit of that and you start to wonder, oh, wait, I must be wrong if everybody else is saying this. But, like, I now look at Donkey Kong 64 and I'm like, you don't need to be that anymore because we have this. We have this brilliant 3D Donkey Kong platformer that does so much of what we wanted and does a whole lot that we never imagined. And I could look at DK64 in a new light for the first time since its release. And yeah, it will never be my favorite, but I enjoy it a lot more now for what it is. And that's one of the great takeaways from it coming to Nintendo Classics, where I can just sit back and everything isn't just this source of aggravation for me. It's like, you know what? That's pretty cool. I don't care that you're not this. You're still pretty interesting being that. And, I don't know, like, it's no longer, to me, like, Rare's big fumble, right? Like, the one blemish in their Nintendo 64 library. It's no longer the one shot we had for a 3D Donkey Kong game. That's the big one. Because it felt like Donkey Kong 64 was our one shot at getting this genre, and we would never have a shot at it again.
It's a building block that's very important, and not only for the history of the series, but for a lot of us fans. Like, you're talking about how much you love the DLC in Bonanza, which I also do, and it's really nice to have that home base, because you just, like, turn on the game and you're in DK Island. Like, that's always where I start off. That's always where I finish when I end a session.
Do you always...
It's home.
Do you always end at Donkey Kong's treehouse?
No, I generally go back. I hop on the King of Rot and I surf around on him. That's what I like to do.
Okay, I should have known. You probably end near the Gangplank Galleon wreckage.
Yes, which is where you spawn in anyway, so that's super convenient, because that's where the warp gong is.
I always have to save at the tuning fork by Donkey Kong's treehouse.
Yeah, understandable. It's nice to have this home base, and that's what DK64 is for me whenever I turn it back on, whenever I revisit it. By the way, this is the first of 3 101% playthroughs I plan to do this year, because I have to do my one for the chronology when we get to it, and then also my annual one sitting playthrough. So yeah, first of 3. But it's home for me, and being there in Bonanza is home, but being there in DK64 is also home. And it was a building block for a lot of us fans around my age. And, you know, we talked about this last time, but if DK64 hadn't come out, then it's likely we might have just not gotten a real DK game outside of Diddy Kong Racing on the N64 at all, because, you know, they might have just canceled it for lack of time, whatever. And then we'd have this gaping hole, and then maybe the buyout would have happened, and we wouldn't even have DK64 to go off of. And like, that's a odd timeline to consider, because this game did end up being important, I think, not only to us fans, but to the devs that went on to make Donkey Kong Bananza. And those devs who are Japanese and grew up reading the instruction manual where it says K. Lomsey and K. Rool are brothers, because I didn't get to bring this up earlier. But that's, I think, the only thing that has really changed when I approach the canon of this game, the lore of this game, as of Bonanza, is that I actually believe that they are brothers now, because that's how the devs would have viewed it, and so I'm willing to adopt that into my worldview.
Okay, all right. I'll let you have that for now. Yeah, I mean, and it's just great though that we can have both on the Nintendo Switch too, right? We can have Bonanza, this big, brilliant, modern 3D Donkey Kong game, and we can have Donkey Kong 64, which, you know, flaws, they may exist in it, but it's still, as you said, very important. It's still a huge building block. It's still, to an entire generation of fans, their Donkey Kong game. And despite everything that Bonanza does so much better, Donkey Kong 64 will always have 4 things that Bonanza does not. And I'm talking, of course, about the pierced nipples of Trough and Scoff.
This has been a File 2 production. Yeah.